Chapter 1. May 17th, 2000. You have transferred $13,666,422.19 into your savings card ending with the numbers 2022. The current balance is $13,667,922.19. Commercial Bank. Jasper looked at the text on his phone, reminding him of his transaction details. He let out a deep breath, a look of excitement emerging on his face. 5 months ago, he was reborn and traveled back in time from the year 2020. He had wasted 40 years of his past life, but the heavens were giving him another shot at life. Jasper Lane, who has been working in the economic industry for more than 10 years, was reborn in the year 2000 with memories and knowledge of the next 20 years to come. Knowing that he could not waste away the next few decades of his life, Jasper started taking action 5 months ago. He did everything based on sheer memory regarding the hottest issue that happened in the country back in 2000, the mung bean futures incident. Jasper sold off his parents' only property and broke into the futures market with an $800,000 fund at a leverage of 20 times. He went through the 5 months in a state of anxiety and distress. On this day, he welcomed the arrival of the remarkable rise in mung bean prices from his memories. As he had initiated an opening 5 months ago, the sudden rise in mung bean prices caused Jasper's personal assets to exceed $10 million. He was clear that the mung bean prices had already reached their limit. There would soon be a persistent decline in its prices for the next few years. Therefore, Jasper did a clearance and withdrew his shares. He got a total of $13.66 million after accounting for processing fees, going from $800,000 to $13.66 million in a day's time. Jasper achieved a financial endeavor most people would not be able to attain throughout their entire lives. After returning the principal and interest, there will still be approximately $12.8 million left. If history does not change its course, and everything takes place just like in my memories, I'll be able to take hold of the following chances to earn more money. Perhaps this $13 million will soon become hundreds of millions, or even billions. He continued looking at the transaction text a few more times. Jasper let out a few loud laughs. He had been poor, wretched, and trapped in debt throughout the entirety of his past life. Every single day was simply another day to pay off his debt. Days passed like years when one lived that way. Nevertheless, everything had changed now. Since he had been poor and wretched throughout his entire past life, he needed to earn lots of money in this lifetime. He had to let his parents enjoy their lives after retirement to make up for all his regrets from his past life. However, he could not be too glad right now. $13 million was not a small sum, but it was not considered much for wealthy people. Before growing strong, he needed to endure everything and develop well in order to obtain gains from every opportunity possible. He had to act cool and maintain a low profile. Just as Jasper was busy thinking about some financial opportunities set in the future, someone knocked at the door. "Jasp, my mother wants you to come home for dinner tonight." Jasper's smile disappeared immediately at the sight of the pretty girl standing outside the door. This was his current girlfriend and wife-to-be, Penelope Hunt. "I'm not free," Jasper replied in a firm tone. "You're not free?" Penelope stared dumbfoundedly at Jasper. Ever since they got to know each other, Jasper had been crazily in love with her and bent to her every will. He agreed to her every request and fawned over her every time they met. However, he seemed like a different person today. Being too used to the way he usually treated her, the stark contrast in his demeanor made Penelope extremely unhappy. Her expression hardened. "My mother wants you to come home for dinner, and you're telling me that you aren't free?" she yelled. Jasper laughed coldly. After going through everything in his past life, he was well aware of this woman's intentions. "Forget the meal. Don't think that I'm oblivious to everything. Your mother wants me to come over just to ask me to lend money to that brother of yours, right?" he asked. Penelope's expression changed. "How did you know?" she asked. "I know everything. I also know that your brother impregnated a woman out there and forced her to get an abortion. She almost lost her life, and now they want him to pay them $300,000, right?" Jasper smirked coldly. Penelope looked at him in distaste. "He's my brother, and we're about to get married. Why are you being so calculative over a small sum of money like this? She asked. A small sum of money? You're asking for $300,000. You know all about my financial situation. My parents have humble roots in the agricultural industry. They worked hard their entire lives just to buy this house for us to live in after getting married. Meanwhile, I just started working. Where should I find $300,000 for your brother? Jasper asked angrily. You can sell off your parents' old house in their hometown. Although it won't be worth much, it's enough to get us $300,000, Penelope stated matter-of-factly. Have you gone crazy? Although this was the second time he was hearing all of this from her because of his past life, Jasper was still enraged all the same. That's my parents' retirement home. Where will they stay after you sell their home? He questioned. Penelope's eyes glimmered. They can rent a place to stay or stay with us for a while, she said. Stay with us? Jasper scoffed. Such sweet words coming from you. Last year, my father came to the city to receive treatment for his illness and stayed with us for a total of 3 days. You made my mother wash your feet for you every day, but only visited my father once during the week he was in the hospital. You couldn't even stay for 3 minutes. Tell me why. Was my father's health not as important as your tea-time appointments? Jasper got more infuriated as he continued talking. He hated Penelope, but he hated his weak self in the past even more. Enough, Jasper Lane. Penelope had a terrible expression on her face. I'm just asking you to allocate some money for my younger brother. Do you want to see him go to court? He's my younger brother, she yelled in rage. Well, he's your King brother, not mine. What the hell does this have to do with me? Jasper roared. All right then. Penelope laughed coldly. As expected, there are no good men out there. That's all I'll say for today. If you don't hand us $300,000, let's break up. We won't have to get married either, she said coldly. Jasper laughed after listening to her words. In his past life, Penelope's family had thrived off him for 10 years after their marriage. Her younger brother became worse after the abortion incident. He did everything from drinking to indulging in debauchery and gambling. Penelope continued forcing him to pay off her brother's debts. This was the main reason why he remained poor throughout his entire past life. Penelope Hunt did not have a hint of genuine feelings for him. She just saw him as a long-term meal ticket. During the wedding, she looked down on his parents for dressing too plainly and refused to let them enter the venue. She had never pondered upon the fact that his parents even sold off their furniture to save up for their wedding. Penelope did not even show up at his parents' funeral. She even got into a huge argument with him and slapped him a few times in public. All this just because she looked down on his parents for passing away pathetically and leaving behind a few $1,000s of rent debt. Thinking back about the past, Jasper clenched his fists and took in a deep breath. The expression on his face turned hard and cold, since the heavens had given him a new chance at life. Not only did he want to become wealthy, but he also wanted to have a fresh start in life. F***ck off. You aren't even worth $300 in my eyes. $300,000? Scram. Chapter 2. Jasper. Wait and see. I'll definitely not let you have your way. Penelope blurted out in anger and left. There was not a hint of regret in Jasper's gaze as he saw Penelope leave in a fit of rage. He should have dumped this woman a long time ago. In the evening, the sky gradually darkened. Jasper wrote down all the opportunities to earn money he could recall from his memories in his notebook in case his memory deteriorated in the future. This was the most important thing in his life right now. He could not be careless about it. Someone knocked on the door out of the blue. Jasper opened the door and was met with the sight of 3 people. Penelope Hunt, her brother, Calvin Hunt, and her mother, Susan Jones. Susan had a snarky expression on her face. Once she caught sight of Jasper, she pointed a finger at him and shouted out loud, Jasper Lane, I'll let my daughter date you since I thought you were honest and genuine. How dare you dump my daughter? You cold-hearted be***starred. Are you still human? Jasper glanced at Penelope, whose eyes were red due to crying. I broke up with her on good terms. Please keep your mouth clean, he said calmly. What F***king bullshit? Calvin Hunt roared out in anger. He pointed at Jasper and shouted, Look at how much my sister is crying. Don't try defending yourself anymore. Don't think I don't know that you did this just because you can't bear to give us some money. Mother, I've told you a long time ago that people from the countryside are extremely calculative. His parents never managed to achieve much throughout their entire lives. So how can you expect their son to achieve anything? How can they compare with people from the city like us? Calvin blurted out. Susan Jones laughed coldly. I must have been blind to allow my daughter to date you then. My son is right. Wretched parents sure do raise wretched children. From this small sum of money, we can tell that your personality is trash, she said. Do you think you can get away like that after wasting my daughter's time all these years? What wishful thinking. Either way, you must give us $300,000. Jasper remained impassive in front of their antics. I don't have money, he said. Susan scoffed. No money? Won't you have money after selling off your parents' house? Exactly, Calvin said matter-of-factly. They can rent a room or sleep on the fields after selling off their house. Anyways, they have been farmers for their entire lives and only know how to plant crops. Maybe they'll feel more at ease living in the fields. As he continued speaking, Calvin's eyes shone with a greedy glint. Hand over this property to me as well. I'm going to get married by the end of this year. I'll need a place to live after getting married. If you do this, I'll advise my sister to get back together with you, he said. Susan's eyes gleamed. After that incident, not only would her son have to pay a compensation fee of $300,000, but he would also have to marry this girl as well. He was worried because he did not have property of his own. Was there not a piece of property right before their eyes at this moment? Yes, this property seems like a pretty good place for Calvin to live in after he gets married, Susan said happily. Jasper laughed aloud at the schemes of this greedy mother and son. What an excellent plan. Not only do you want me to sell my parents' house, but you want this house as well? My parents used all of their savings to buy this house for after I marry. You're such an idiot, Calvin said impatiently. If my mother and I do not agree, who else will marry a wretched country boy like you? What do you still want this house for? Isn't this house for you and your wife to live in? You can express your sincerity by giving this house to me as your wedding gift for me. Right then, Penelope started speaking as well. That's right, Jasper. He's my only brother. We've worked so hard just for him all along, isn't that right? Listen to them now. Call your parents and ask them to sell their house. Then hand over this property to my brother tomorrow when you go to work. If you do so, I can forgive you and will agree to marry you. Have you guys gone insane? Jasper gazed at the three of them coldly. Do I owe your family anything? Or have I not told Penelope clearly enough this afternoon? I told her to scram. I'm now asking the three of you to scram. Penelope and I aren't in a relationship anymore. What right do you guys have to order me around? He questioned. Jasper's words infuriated Susan even more. She stared at Jasper pointedly and gritted her teeth. You're really an ungrateful B***starred. F***king B***starred, she yelled. Jasper Lane? Penelope shrieked. Look at how much you've angered Mother. Apologize at once. Do you recall what you told me when you were chasing after me in the past? You aren't even willing to do this for me right now. Are you still human? She asked. F***ck, he chased after my sister like a dog in the past. Now he's just walking away from her like that. Jasper Lane, you're F***king despicable. You wretched B***starred. Your entire family is wretched as hell. Before Calvin could finish speaking, Jasper glared at him coldly. This is my house. Let me tell you one last time, scram, Jasper yelled. After that, he slammed the door closed with a loud bang. Looking at the closed door, Susan trembled in rage. Mother, I'm sorry. I didn't know that he's someone like this, Penelope cried. Calvin's expression darkened as well. Mother, what shall we do now? This B***starred doesn't want to sell his house. I can't go to court. My life will be ruined. What about my house? He asked. Susan stared at the door angrily. She said spitefully, It's late now. Let's go back first. There will come a time when this ungrateful B***starred will be hit by karma. Susan stared at the door angrily. She said spitefully, It's late now. Let's go back first. There will come a time when this ungrateful B***starred will be hit by karma. Jasper did not bother about them. He did not give a damn about what they said at all. Now that he had money, he could become a millionaire or a billionaire in the future. Would he still be afraid of a few rogues pestering him? In the week after, the Hunts did not come over to look for trouble with him. Jasper felt at ease as well. However, he did not spend his time in vain either. Based on his memories, he knew that something huge was about to happen in this small town. In his past life, he knew that a ruby pendant had appeared in a jewelry shop called Glory Jewelers within the town. The boss of the shop promoted this ruby pendant as an antique piece, but this pendant was once worn by an English monarch in the past. Therefore, the pendant was being sold as a treasure of the shop. However, with a price tag of $500,000, nobody in town would buy it. Despite the gimmick, no one believed in it. They had to be kidding. An antique ruby pendant worn by a monarch was selling for only $500,000? This was obviously a promotion scheme. However, nobody would have expected the pendant to be sold off to a merchant who owned a foreign business. The boss of the jewelry shop even laughed at him for getting scammed by a fake product. Half a year later, the ruby pendant appeared in the country's largest auction event and was identified as a genuine piece. It got sold off at a monumental price of $40 million. It was rumored that the boss of the jewelry shop was so angered by the news that he had to be sent to the hospital. According to his memories, today was the day the ruby pendant would be listed for sale. This time around, Jasper would definitely not let someone else get the chance to buy it with $500,000 and sell it off at a price of almost 80 times higher. Jasper left his house early in the morning. He took a cab to the Grand Plaza and headed straight toward Glory Jewelers. When he arrived at the shop, a bunch of customers was already there. "Rickton, thank you so much." Penelope happily gazed at the ruby bracelet on her wrist. It cost $3,000. It was not a gift that anyone would simply purchase for someone else. The person called Rickton was a middle-aged man. He had a large head, big ears, and a protruding belly. Clad in a suit, he smiled cheerily at Penelope. A glimmer of satisfaction and greed flashed across his eyes. He had his eyes on Penelope from a long time ago. It was just that he did not have the time to chase after her. But she recently started to approach him voluntarily. There was no way Rickton White would not go after her. After all, it would only cost him gifts that cost a few $1,000s. He could afford that much. It's just a small gift. What's important is that you're happy. Rickton White laughed aloud. He turned over to look at Calvin and Susan, who were both staring at him in admiration. "Calvin, Mrs. Jones, each of you should choose a piece that you like as well. It'll be my welcome gift for you," he said. Looks of surprise appeared on Calvin and Susan's faces. They smiled from ear to ear and showered Rickton with incessant praises. Right then, Jasper entered the shop. The sight of an enemy tended to make one feel vengeful. "Hey, isn't that the calculative and wretched country bumpkin? Why are you here? Everything here costs a few $1,000s at least. You cannot afford any of it," he drawled on in a joking tone. "Maybe he's here to apply for the position of a security guard," Penelope said condescendingly with a cold smile on her face. Susan scoffed. She took hold of Penelope's wrist. TSK, look at this bracelet. It costs $3,000. Someone with taste and class bought it at a whim. People like you can only earn that much if you work for 2 months without eating or drinking. Isn't that right?" she asked. Rickton White stared at Jasper with a meaningful gaze. He knew that Penelope had a boyfriend. It seemed like he was the one. Rickton smiled faintly. There was a nonchalant expression on his greasy face. "It's nothing at all. I'm not good at much, but I can't stand seeing the ones I care for suffering from injustice," he said. Upon hearing his words, Penelope was touched. She leaned on Rickton. "Rickton, you treat me so well, unlike someone who's poor and calculative. He deserves to remain as trash for the rest of his life," she said. Jasper ignored their taunting. He and these people were from different worlds ever since the moment he was reborn. Walking straight toward the counter, Jasper asked the sales assistant, "Excuse me, can you please take out the antique ruby pendant?" Calvin laughed out loud after hearing what he said. "Huh? Has this fool gone crazy? Antique ruby pendant? Why are you asking someone to take it out when you can't even afford it?" he asked. Rickton shook his head. Rash people like him were easily provoked. This man resorted to doing something illogical after they had taunted him a little. "Hey, acting cool comes with a limit. What if they really take it out? Will you buy it or not?" he asked calmly. Susan smirked in distaste. Maybe he wants to see it just to gain some knowledge about the world. Alas, lowly country bumpkins like him have never seen anything good. After looking at it, he may even go back to the countryside to brag about it, she said. Everyone burst out into laughter upon hearing what she said. The sales assistant stared at Jasper with a questioning look on her face. She did not know him, but she knew Rickton White. He always brought women here to buy gifts for them. From what he said, this young man before her did not have much money. The sales assistant was too lazy to serve him as well. Sir, that ruby pendant costs a lot. If you aren't buying it, please don't waste our time, she said coldly. Who says I'm not buying it? Give it to the person who's asking you to take it out. Will your boss forgive you if this deal gets delayed because of you? Jasper questioned her. The sales assistant's expression changed instantly. She hummed coldly. All right, I'll take it out. Let's see if you can afford it. The sales assistant then turned over to open the safe. She retrieved a tray and placed it before Jasper. She sneered coldly. My boss brought this ruby pendant over last night. It was once worn by an English monarch. It's priced at $500,000. No bargain is available. $500,000? Penelope and the others took in a sharp breath. Even Rickton's eyes began to twitch. Not everyone could take out $500,000 at a time like this. This ruby pendant was well-shaped and had a great luster, but it did not seem to be much different from Penelope's ruby bracelet in terms of color or appearance. Rickton shook his head. He could spend a few $1,000s to have fun with a girl like Penelope Hunt, but something like this was beyond him. However, this was something that even he could not afford. What about this guy? Rickton laughed coldly. What a nice piece. It's a pity that my funds are still tied up to my previous investment. Otherwise, I'd buy one just for fun. I guess for someone like you. You can only take a look, right? He drawled. Exactly. Penelope moved her greedy gaze away from the ruby pendant. She looked at Jasper contemptuously. Now that you've seen it, can you scram? She asked. Rickton pulled out his bank card and handed it to the sales assistant. He spoke cheerily. Give me the bill. You need to look closely next time. Don't let some poor B***stards enter the shop. People like me are the real customers. What can he even do? He even requested for the antique ruby pendant after entering the shop. How embarrassing. Smack. A black VIP bank card was slammed on top of Rickton's normal bank card. It glimmered in all of its luxurious glory under the light. Swipe this card, Jasper said coldly. The atmosphere of the jewelry shop dampened instantly. Ha ha ha. Calvin pointed at Jasper and burst into a frenzy of laughter. Has this fool really gone crazy? You want to buy something worth $500,000 with a card like that? If this worthless card has $500,000 in it, I'll kneel down before you and call you my father. He sniggered. However, Rickton could not bring himself to laugh out loud. His mouth became dry as he caught sight of the luxurious black bank card. He knew that only those with up to $10 million in their savings account could apply for this card. At least $10 million. Rickton had never seen so much money in his entire life. One could lie, but there was no way for this card to be fake. Rickton stared at Jasper, the corners of his eyes twitching lightly. Right then, the sales assistant took the card and swiped it on the machine. Jasper entered his password and a beep sounded from the machine. After that, the machine printed out a long bill. Everyone could see that this was the sign of a successful transaction. He had really paid $500,000. Upon taking a glimpse at the balance of his bank card, the magnanimous amount of several tens of million dollars made the sales assistant's heart lurch. This was her first time seeing so much money in her life. Keeping his card, Jasper turned around to face Calvin, who had a stunned expression on his face. You can kneel down before me, but there's no need to call me your father. That would disgust me. Chapter 4. Upon hearing Jasper's words, the disbelief on Calvin's face instantly morphed into an expression of anger and jealousy. He gritted his teeth as he stared at Jasper pointedly. Where did you get all this money from? You said that you didn't have money a few days ago, but now you have $500,000 to buy a ruby pendant, he questioned. This is my money. I don't have to tell you where I got it from. What I do with it is none of your business as well, Jasper said. Humph. Calvin sneered coldly. You must have sold your house, right? Otherwise, where did you get all that money from? He asked. He must have done so. TSK, what a sinner. How can you sell your house just to buy a ruby pendant? You've really gone mad, Susan commented. The sales assistant had already packaged the ruby pendant nicely for him. She did not talk to Jasper in an impatient tone anymore. Sir, your ruby pendant has been wrapped up, she said in a tone full of respect. Wait! Penelope shouted out loud. Jasper, give me that ruby pendant. I don't care where you got the money from. We've been together for such a long time. My brother needs money now, but you said you didn't have money, so just give me this ruby pendant, she said. Susan's eyes lit up with a glint. She nodded in agreement. That's right. Give us this ruby pendant and we'll forgive you, she said. You guys must have gone insane. Are you snatching it from me now? Jasper asked in a harsh tone. After speaking, he turned away and left. Penelope was anxious. She reached out to hold on to Jasper's arm. Jasper Lane, are you going to be that cruel? She shrieked. I'm being cruel? I may be cruel, but nothing compares to how disgustingly shameless your family is. Jasper laughed. After speaking, he flung Penelope aside and walked away with large strides. Penelope and her family were overcome with shame after Jasper left. The looks on their faces were horrendous. Mother, we cannot let this go. Filled with jealousy, Calvin's face darkened. In their eyes, Jasper was a poor country bumpkin. They had never taken him seriously before. However, now that he could buy a ruby pendant that cost $500,000 just like that, they yearned for that pendant despite not knowing where he got the money from. Poor B** stars like him should remain as lowly trash. Why does he have to buy something that good? That belongs to me. He must have sold his house or gotten money from somewhere. Anyway, I should be the rightful owner of all that money. Calvin gritted his teeth in a fit of rage. My son, don't be angry. Susan comforted Calvin, saying, let's go back and discuss things. We cannot let him get away after playing with your sister's feelings for so many years. He must pay for what he did. At least he must pay us with money, she exclaimed. Penelope looked in the direction Jasper left. A spiteful glint flashed through her gaze. Mother is right. We cannot let this go. He has money, but he wasn't willing to give any of it to me even though he told me he loved me. I can't let him be at ease like that. Jasper left the jewelry shop and was just about to hail for a cab by the roadside. Apps to call for cabs did not exist yet. Just as he was considering taking the opportunity to design an app to call for cabs, he received a phone call. Someone from the commercial bank was calling him. Hello, Mr. Lane. We've reported the terms we discussed to the district branch. If you can ensure that your annual savings won't go below $10 million, we'll give you the best interest rates and VIP treatment as discussed. When are you free right now? We'll bring the contract over for you to sign it. Jasper was not surprised by how things turned out. This was a guaranteed minimum cash deposit of $10 million. At a time like this was a huge deal for any banks out there. I'm nearby right now. Also, I have something that I intend to save in your security safe. I'll come over right now, Jasper said. He then hung up the call. He hailed a cab and headed over to Commercial Bank. Jasper bumped into someone right as he entered the bank. F***CK, are you blind? That person yelled out in anger. When they both took a good look at each other, Terry Lane was delighted. Hey, Jasper, is your salary out today? Are you here to withdraw money? He asked. There was a stylish woman dressed in modern clothing by Terry's side. She walked over and snuggled up to Terry. Who's this? She asked coquettishly. Terry laughed happily. He's my cousin. Their entire family works as farmers. His parents borrowed money for him to buy a house in town back then. They asked for money from me as well, he said cheerily. The woman blinked her eyes. How much did you borrow him then? She asked. Borrow money, my *SS. Terry scoffed loudly. Their family is full of dimwits. Don't buy a house if you don't have money. They can't even afford their meals, yet they want to live in town. Just look at what they're made of. I pitied them, so King gave them $50 to buy some supplements to re-nourish their brains. Ha ha ha. The woman burst into giggles. She eyed Jasper contemptuously, then turned over to Terry's side. You're such a meanie, she said. Jasper gazed at Terry, who had a look of superiority on his face. Nevertheless, he remained calm. Terry Lane was his cousin. His father opened a factory in town some time ago and earned some money doing that. Terry was considered a second-generation millionaire in their hometown. Terry condemned Jasper and even his parents, who were his seniors, as much as he wished just because he was rich. However, Jasper knew very well that the factory was just a facade. Terry would lose almost all the money, triggering a financial crisis which would cause the factory to close down eventually. There were rumors that a woman tricked him of all his money as well. There was no news about him after he left his hometown. That woman was probably the person before him right now. "Don't stop me from doing work," Jasper said in a chilly tone. "Doing work?" Terry laughed out loud with a contemptuous look on his face. "Does your F*King monthly salary even add up to $1,000? Does withdrawing $100 or $200 count as work for you? F*CK off. Aren't you embarrassed?" he asked. Before Terry finished laughing, a middle-aged man dressed in a suit rushed out from the bank in a hurry. That man made his way forward under the guidance of an employee. His eyes shone upon seeing Jasper. He greeted him respectfully. "You must be Mr. Lane. As expected, you're young and competent. I'm Mr. Jackson, the president here." Seeing John Jackson flattering Jasper, Terry and the woman beside him were shocked. He called Mr. Lane. "Is he calling you?" The woman pulled on Terry's sleeve. Terry snapped back into focus. That was right. He was Mr. Lane as well. Mr. Jackson must be calling him. How could he be calling that poor jerk, Jasper Lane? "President Jackson, I've just added $20,000 to my savings, and you're greeting me like this?" Terry asked John. John furrowed his brows. An employee hurried over at once. "President, our client is on the other side," the employee said. John nodded. He smiled at Jasper without looking at Terry. "Mr. Lane, shall we go upstairs?" he asked respectfully. Jasper nodded nonchalantly. "Let's go. Besides, I want to apply for a security safe as well." "Let's carry out the procedure at the same time," he said. The ruby pendant he owned would be worth $40 million half a year later. He would definitely feel the most secure keeping it at the bank. Jasper then raised his head, puffed up his chest, and walked forward. Meanwhile, President Jackson and a group of employees followed him by the side. They walked away just like that. Terry, who was left there, looked at them with disbelief. Chapter 5. With the president doing things for him personally, all the procedures were completed smoothly. The interest Jasper received was thrice the normal rate. This was the most premium treatment one could apply for in this small town. Jasper did not really care about how much interest he received. He just wanted to let the commercial bank know his financial power. Not long after, something would occur in the international futures market for crude oil. As an ordinary person, it was impossible for him to go overseas to start an account and begin speculating the prices of crude oil. He needed to do this through his connections with the commercial bank. At the same time, the commercial bank gave him a premium credit card with a quota of $1 million as well. If this was 20 years in the future, the commercial bank would not hand a card like that over to someone with a cash deposit of $10 million. However, this was the year 2000, and $10 million was enough to let Jasper become a premium client in any banks out there. Jasper was overcome with mixed feelings as he looked at this card. In his past life, Jasper's cards all got swiped past their limit because of Penelope Hunt. Those days, he could only imagine having a credit card with a larger quota. However, now that he had achieved everything so easily, having the card did not mean much to him anymore. After completing the procedures, Jasper left the bank with John's well wishes. While hailing a cab, he thought that it was about time for him to buy a car as well. It would be too much of a hassle to hail a cab every day. On the other hand, he intended to sell the house that he was living in right now. If he did not do so, Penelope Hunt and her family would continue bothering him till the end of time. There was no way to know how far they would take things. He intended to buy 2 houses in the city, one for himself and another for his parents to live in. Now that he was wealthy, he could bring his parents over and let them enjoy their lives. However, buying property required a large number of funds. Although Jasper had the money, he wanted to use this amount of money as his principal. He needed it to earn a large sum of money in his upcoming mission regarding crude oil futures trading. If he had not recalled wrongly, For every extra $10,000 he had in his principal, he would earn $1 million more in his future revenue. With this thought in his head, Jasper found the name card given to him by John and called the number on it. The phone call went through very quickly. "Mr. Lane, how can I help you?" John Jackson was very happy to receive a call from Jasper. Although this town was well developed, there were not many wealthy people here. Jasper was the only client John had with more than $10 million in cash deposit, so he needed to get on his good side. Jasper smiled. "You're being too courteous, President Jackson. There's something that I'd like to discuss with you," he said. "I intend to gain the rights to open an international futures account at the commercial bank. Will you be able to help me do so?" he asked. John sounded stunned on the other side of the phone. The atmosphere turned serious. As the president of the commercial bank, he had his ways. Furthermore, Jasper's account was bound to a domestic securities account. He knew that Jasper was probably the mysterious retail investor who rose to fame in the mung bean futures market not long ago. His principal of $800,000 had turned into $13 million in 5 months' time. It was a miracle. However, he did not expect that this mysterious retail investor, whom many were curious about, actually intended to trade international futures. If this went well, he would not have to worry about his work performance this year. "That will be no problem. We run this kind of business as well." John clapped his hand against his chest and continued speaking. "Mr. Lane, what product do you intend to trade futures for?" he asked carefully. "Crude oil." Jasper smiled. There was no need to hide it from him. Besides, he would have to sign a contract regarding the product type he intended to trade when he opened the account. The commercial bank would eventually know. Although he knew that Jasper was someone who managed to turn the tides in the domestic futures market, breaking into the international futures market was not a trivial matter. However, once he heard that Jasper's target was crude oil, John's heart lurched. As a strategic supply, crude oil was not something someone ordinary could set their hands on. Jasper intended to do too much. Besides, all the major countries in the world were interested in crude oil. Who dared to speculate crude oil prices without having the nerves to do so? The next day, Jasper appeared in the commercial bank once it opened. This time, John was waiting for him at the door personally. Compared to their first meeting, they were now much more familiar with each other. John sincerely wanted to hold on to a big client like Jasper. Jasper was also happy to maintain a good relationship with the current president of the district branch. After all, he would be the future president of the town district and become the second in command of the province district. Networking was equally important when one was earning money. After talking to Jasper, John's admiration for him grew. Jasper was only in his early 20s, but he had already gathered an astonishing amount of wealth. A determined young man would act arrogantly no matter how much he tried to conceal it. However, John could not detect that sort of arrogance and oppression from Jasper. Nevertheless, how could John have known that Jasper had lived for 2 lifetimes? He had way more experience than him. The frivolity of his youth had long been tempered in the warmth and coldness of his past life. Now that they were more familiar with each other, instead of calling each other with formalities like Mr. Lane or President Jackson, they called each other Jasp and John. In the reception room, Jasper smiled and took a sip of Earl Grey tea. "John, I'm an impatient person. If there are no problems with the procedure, I plan to complete it today," he said. "No problem. The commercial bank has a specialized agency to deal with the international futures market, including currency exchange and agency trading. Everything is available," John promised him. As he spoke, John picked up the phone on the office table and called a number. After exchanging 2 sentences with the other person, he hung up the phone. After putting down the phone, John chuckled and stared at Jasper with a meaningful gaze. "Jasp, the opening of the international futures account is operated by the securities company under the commercial bank this time around. Therefore, I've arranged a personal assistant for you. She'll listen to your instructions at all times. She's well known for her beauty within the industry," he said. Jasper did not expect John to play this card. Just as he was about to say something, someone knocked on the door of the reception room. A woman clad in a black suit entered. The woman was extremely pretty. She was tall, slender, and curvy with delicate, pale skin. Her eyes were bright, while her teeth were brilliantly white. The sight of her alone made one's heart skip a beat. Most importantly, she had an impeccable aura. She seemed smart and capable, but she also gave out a comforting sense of gentleness at the same time. A woman like that would be the center of everyone's attention, no matter where she went. Jasper was stunned as well, but he was not attracted by her beautiful looks. She was someone he knew very well. Wendy Schuler. Chapter 6. They were classmates of 6 years throughout junior high and high school. During high school, they were even once desk mates. Wendy Schuler was the prettiest and smartest girl in school. Other than being competent, she had the looks as well. After all these years, she had become even more feminine and pretty. Meanwhile, Jasper was a completely different story. He constantly got bullied as his family was poor. Wendy was the only one who never bullied him. At that young and ignorant age, Jasper had once imagined the possibility of being in a relationship with her. Nevertheless, the gap between them was way too large. Eventually, Wendy managed to get into a top university, whereas Jasper attended an ordinary one. The both of them lost contact after that. Then, Jasper met Penelope and applied all the hidden feelings he had for Wendy to her instead. From the way things turned out, Penelope was not worth it at all. However, this did not affect the lovely memories he had of Wendy. "Jasper Lane, is it really you?" Wendy gasped upon catching sight of Jasper. A glint of disbelief and shock flashed through her pretty eyes. When she heard that the big client John wanted her to take on was called Jasper Lane, she simply thought that it was someone with the same name and surname. As soon as she set eyes on him in the reception room, she knew that he was her old classmate. Although many years had gone by, and their appearances had changed a lot, she recognized him right away. The quietest and most ordinary person back in school then was now one of the commercial bank's big clients. She even had to become his personal assistant. Wendy could not believe it. "Long time no see, Wendy," Jasper said while smiling warmly. "The both of you know each other?" John was shocked upon finding out that the both of them were old friends. "We're old classmates." John laughed out loud. Since Jasper was reluctant to reveal much, he did not ask much as well. He simply instructed Wendy to serve Jasper well, as he was a respected client. After bidding John goodbye, the both of them headed toward the securities company. "I can't believe that you're a millionaire now. If our classmates find out, they'll be shocked," Wendy said. "It just happened by chance. I never expected to meet you again one day," Jasper said in response. Wendy laughed softly. Her beauty was unbelievable. Wendy's beauty was not gaudy. She was as pure and genuine as a lotus flower. Each and every one of her small details made one's heart skip a beat. "I never expected to see you again, too. You've changed a lot," Wendy exclaimed. "How was I in the past? What about now?" Jasper asked. Wendy burst out into laughter. "You've spoken more to me in the time we just met than the 6 years we were classmates. You were quiet back then. You did not fight back against others despite being bullied. You were extremely socially awkward," she said. As Wendy spoke, she set her clear gaze upon Jasper. His silhouette was reflected clearly in his eyes. "You're immensely confident now. There's an indescribable aura surrounding you. You seem like a really experienced person, but you have the liveliness one at your age is supposed to have as well. In conclusion, you're different," she said. She laughed and extended her hand. "This is my first job. I want to do well. Let me introduce myself to you once again. Nice to meet you, Mr. Lane. I'm your personal assistant. You can call me Wendy Schuler," she greeted him. Jasper reached out his hand and clasped Wendy's soft, delicate hand gently. "Don't call me Mr. Lane. You can call me Jasp," he said. It was the first time the both of them were shaking hands, but it felt like they were holding hands instead. Jasper never imagined a day when Wendy would be his personal assistant. When they shook hands, Wendy's heart skipped a beat inexplicably. Maybe it was because they were old classmates. It could also be due to Jasper's enormous transformation. Looking at him, he was a confident man who oozed a sense of flamboyance. A sense of admiration for him arose in Wendy's heart. She even started thinking of her own standards for choosing a partner. A furious blush washed over her face. Having reunited after such a long time, the both of them chatted happily on their way to the securities company. The securities company under the commercial bank was the country's largest securities company. They even had a sales department in this small town. Working in conjunction with the commercial bank as Jasper's personal assistant, Wendy was very familiar with the mandatory procedures that they needed to carry out. After a moment's wait, Jasper contacted the department manager at once. Ordinary staff members were not qualified to handle Jasper's business. The securities hall was extremely lively. The number of stock traders was increasing daily as the market was transitioning from a bearish to a bullish trend. Hence, many people were coming forth to open a trading account. Penelope Hunt and Rickton White were among the crowd. "Rickton, there are so many people here," Penelope told Rickton, who was by her side, after looking at the crowded hall before them. Rickton chuckled. "The market is great right now. You can easily earn money. That's why many people are here to open an account. You've made an excellent choice to follow me, since you want to earn money. I'm a high-profile client here, so I have many close confidants. Therefore, you won't have to line up like these ordinary people," he boasted. "You're the best, Rickton. You have close confidants everywhere. I've brought over the savings of my entire family. You must help me earn money," Penelope said in admiration. "Don't worry. You'll surely earn money if you follow me." Rickton chuckled. As Penelope followed Rickton into the securities company, she caught sight of Jasper some distance away. Her initial shock turned into a cold laugh. She took large strides and made her way toward him. The road of enemies is really narrow. Penelope did not expect to meet this jerk here. It seemed that Jasper was here to open an account for stock trading. Thinking of his stingy demeanor, she immediately sneered at him. "Are you here to open an account to trade stocks as well?" "Can I do so?" Jasper asked calmly. Penelope scoffed after listening to what he said. "I thought that you were brainless in the past. Now that I look at you again, you really lack the brains. Do you think that you can earn money just because others can? Do you think that it's so easy to trade stocks?" she questioned. "It isn't easy for your parents to earn money by growing crops. Don't dirty the stock market. Why don't you look at your own self-worth? Do you even understand what the market is?" she added. Chapter 7. Penelope's voice was shrill and mean. At the same time, the hall was crowded with people as well. All of a sudden, Jasper became the center of everyone's attention as they all set their curious eyes on him. "This isn't your home. Me being here has nothing to do with you. Please don't bother me," Jasper said with a frown on his face. Penelope sneered coldly. "It's true that it has nothing to do with me. I'm just worried that the 2 coins in your pocket are insufficient for you to pay the handling fees. How dare you come to trade stocks? What an embarrassment," she exclaimed. Right then, Rickton White walked over as well. After seeing Jasper's card in Glory Jewelers that day, Rickton pondered upon it for an entire day. How could a young man in his early 20s own up to $10 million in funds? Therefore, that card did not belong to Jasper. Some wealthy person must have asked Jasper to do him or her a favor. Rickton's mind cleared after thinking about it that way. He felt much more at ease. "All right, Penelope. Why are you being calculative with a poor jerk who has never seen the outside world? My friend has already arranged things for us. We can go straight to the VIP room to open an account. A poor jerk like him may never even get the chance to see what a VIP room looks like in his entire life." Rickton walked over and spoke to Penelope with a grin on his face. A satisfied and superior glint flashed across Penelope's gaze. "That's right. You're the best, Rickton. You can enter the VIP room as you please while a poor jerk like him can only admire us," she taunted him. Penelope then sent a long, condescending glare at Jasper. After they left, Wendy brought a middle-aged man over in a rush. Once Wendy appeared, her gorgeous looks attracted the attention of everyone in the hall. Men and women of all ages alike had their eyes on her. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Lane. I'm Harold Wood. My apologies for letting you wait." After hearing all about Jasper, the middle-aged man sprinted down at almost record speed. A high-profile client like Jasper was rare. If he managed to sign a contract with him, his work performance would be enhanced. "It's all right," Jasper said. Inside the private reception room. "Mr. Lane, are you intending to trade crude oil futures?" "No problem. President Jackson has instructed us to give you the highest discount on the commission," Harold told Jasper in a courteous tone. "The account opening and agency fees will be fully waived. However, to facilitate the drafting of the contract, please tell me how much do you plan to invest and the leverage you intend to use." he requested. $12 million. I want leverage of 50 times to turn that $12 million into $600 million, which will be used as the operating funds. If the amount is too small, it'll be a waste of time. The entire reception room fell into pin-drop silence after Jasper spoke. Mr. Lane, that's way too risky, Harold stuttered. As the business manager of a securities company, Harold had seen plenty of astronomical figures. $600 million was nothing much, but as a personal future speculator, Jasper dared to use $12 million to leverage $600 million in funds. Harold would never dare to do so. High risks, high returns. Mr. Wood, are you afraid of accepting this offer? Jasper asked, directing a meaningful smile toward him. Mr. Lane, we can accept your offer under one condition. You must deposit $12 million into the account of the securities company in the full margin, and it cannot be transferred out until your futures account is cleared, Harold said. Jasper nodded. He smiled and extended his hand. It's a pleasure working with you, he said. Harold sighed in relief. He clasped Jasper's hand with both of his hands. Harold, who was rather well known in the financial industry, set an inexplicable gaze on Jasper. The young man before him was unfathomable. The signing of the contract proceeded quickly. When he finally found the chance to say something, Mr. Lane, Jasp, isn't it too risky to do so? Wendy admired Jasper's boldness. However, she was rather worried as well. I'm confident that I can do it. Jasper laughed and pointed to the seat opposite him. Sit down. Although you're my personal assistant, I'm not your boss. Let's get along as friends, he told her. Wendy pursed her lips and smiled. The serious atmosphere of the reception room brightened immediately. I'm clear about my thoughts. Jasper pointed to his head. That's why I only do things that I'm certain of. Once I'm sure of something, there's no need to care about what others think. If it's something that I don't understand, I'll never touch it, he said. Jasper said these words with the intention to help Wendy. From the memories of his past life, he knew that Wendy was the daughter of a wealthy man. Her father, Dawson Schuler, was the richest man in the province. None of their classmates knew about this. Jasper found out about it after the incident regarding Dawson Schuler happened. Right now, Dawson Schuler was still the richest man in the province in name. However, the incident must have already occurred. Almost half a year later, there would be news of the capital chain of Schuler corporations being broken. The province's richest man, Dawson Schuler, then committed suicide by jumping off a building. Dawson Schuler went bankrupt because he entered the financial industry, which he was not familiar with at all despite having earned his fortune through textiles. Coincidentally, he encountered a financial crisis that caused billions upon billions of dollars to disappear in a flash. After Dawson passed away, Wendy would be tormented by the loss. She was the only classmate who had never looked down on him and was also the beautiful girl he had a crush on for the longest time. He wanted to try helping her in this lifetime so that things would not turn out the same way. Wendy was a pure-hearted girl. She seemed to ponder upon something after listening to what he said. However, she did not say anything in response. After signing the agreement and completing the fund transfer under Wendy's operation, Jasper had $12 million of funds available in his international futures account. Jasper still had $1.6 million left in his account, which he used to open a domestic trading account. It would take a few days for the crude oil market to spark up. During this period of time, he could seize the opportunity of the rising domestic stock market to make a fortune by purchasing a few well-known odd stocks. Since this year was the millennium year, the domestic stock market would rise in a stable manner up till 2008. If he was not too unlucky during this period of time, he would be able to obtain long-term earnings with some stocks in hand. In the midst of all this, a lot of investors had been blinded by a few renowned odd stocks. Some people took this opportunity and rose up to wealth, whereas a majority of them could only look at the rising prices of these odd stocks in dismay. Since Jasper had the chance to be reborn, he did not want to miss out on a chance like this. Do you have any private savings? Jasper suddenly asked Wendy after creating his domestic trading account. Wendy was stunned. I've saved up more than $200,000, she said awkwardly. During times like this, it was a remarkable feat for Wendy to save up $200,000. However, this was nothing much given her family background. Let's earn some money together, Jasper said, convincing her to open an account as well. Chapter 8. Although Wendy Schuler did not understand the stock market, she had heard of it and was eager to try. She hesitated a little, but chose to trust Jasper and immediately went to open an account. Tangent Technology, Kane Industry, and Phoenix Pharmaceutical. These three stocks. With such a beautiful personal assistant as Wendy, Jasper certainly did not bother to do it himself. After the names were given out, Wendy opened the accounts for these three stocks separately. In his past life, these three were the most bullish stocks during this period. How do we buy it? Wendy asked. The $1.8 million in cash was lying in wait in the account she operated. It was an indisputably large amount of money in this era. However, Wendy was not nervous. After all, as the daughter of the richest man in the province, she saw money more than others would play with Lego blocks. However, Jasper's next words stunned Wendy. All in? All? Invest everything? Wendy said in shock. Although this was the first time that she had personally traded stocks, she did not lack theoretical knowledge as she studied finance in university. It was the first time that she saw someone being so ruthless. Once an account was opened, more than 1 million funds would enter the market directly. Was this arrogance or madness? Yes. Trust me, do it now. Place a market order. Jasper frowned as he said, not allowing any questioning from Wendy. Seeing Jasper's serious expression, Wendy did not say any more, but immediately did as Jasper instructed. She put in a pending order, and in the next second, the transaction was completed. Seeing the available funds in the account turning into a single digit, the software also prompted that the order was too heavy and the risk was too high. Wendy breathed a sigh of relief. Let's head to the digital mall later. We'll each get a computer for office use, Jasper suddenly said. Whether dabbling in futures or the stock market, a computer was essential. It was not possible for him to go to the securities company to trade every day. Okay, should we go now? Wendy nodded and got up. Hold on. Jasper shook his head. Wait until we earn the money to buy the computer. Wendy was oblivious and looked at Jasper suspiciously, but she saw that the latter was looking at the computer with a smile on his face. Right after Jasper entered the market, the stock price of Phoenix Pharmaceuticals suffered a fluctuation and fell instead of rising. Everyone, including Wendy, was a little startled to see this scene. Jasper was so confident to trade everything he had into the stocks, and they actually did not rise but fell. Seeing the stock price falling, Wendy could not help but say, Jasper, did you make a mistake? She uttered out what everyone else was thinking. Everyone looked at Jasper with scorching eyes, many of them gloating. Wendy was worried that Jasper would lose his dignity and become angry, so she was thinking about how to turn the situation around. I might have read it wrong before, but this time I won't, Jasper said calmly. Just as Jasper uttered those words, everyone had no time to react yet. Suddenly, a thick line appeared like a dragon emerging from the sea. In a situation where everyone was unprepared, the stock price of Phoenix Pharmaceutical directly soared toward the sky. It directly hit the daily limit. It really went up? It reached the limit too? Within 5 minutes, while talking and laughing, they earned more than 100,000. Amazing! Next to him, Harold Wood, who was watching the whole time, was dumbfounded and spat out words of admiration. Is there really anyone in this world who can tell fortunes? Wendy looked at Jasper, who was surrounded by the admiring crowd, and looked at her own account that had already made more than 20,000 in profit. She could only find it unbelievable. For someone of her background, more than 20,000 was really nothing. However, it must also be known that this amount was earned in a few minutes just because of Jasper's words. Was there an easier way to make money in this world? No wonder her father was so obsessed with entering the financial field. Wendy frowned and peeked at Jasper. If he was so capable, he might be able to help her father, who was already in trouble. At this time at the same securities company, Penelope and Richton's faces turned pale. Looking at the K-line diagram in front of them, and then at the funds, there was a total of 770,000. This was the money her mother Susan got when she mortgaged the house. However, in just a few minutes, they lost 10% from the 770,000. It stopped trading. Richton's face was very unpleasant. To be honest, in order to get Penelope, He sincerely intended to earn some money for her. However, the stock market was unpredictable and no one could guarantee a steady profit. To be on the safe side, Richten chose a stock that he had observed for a long time. Although it was unlikely to rise sharply, the advantage was also that it was unlikely to lose money. However, misfortune struck. As soon as Penelope entered, the stock immediately fell to a rock-bottom position and did not move since then. That's 77,000 gone? Penelope stared at the screen blankly, unable to accept it. Alas, the stock market is like this. The risk is also very high, but this is only the profit and loss of the current position. If it rises in the future, we can still recover the losses, Richten said. However, Penelope had no ears for his explanation. The 770,000 was the money she had gotten by mortgaging her house. She thought that she could make a fortune, but now she had lost 1/10 of it right at the start. At this moment, an announcement appeared. The stocks that Penelope bought were suspended because of a major violation. It was hard to say when trading would resume for this suspension. Besides, even if the market reopened, the stock price would at least be cut in half due to such massive negative news. Penelope's face went pale. She dared not imagine how her brother and mother would react if they found out about this incident. With clammy hands and feet, Penelope suddenly panicked. After earning 110,000, Jasper was very happy. Under Harold's starry gaze, he left the securities company and took Wendy to the nearby digital city. He chose 2 of the latest laptops and spent more than 30,000. It was a lot of money, but for Jasper it was nothing. After buying the computers, Jasper and Wendy went to a nearby cafe together. In the year 2000, in addition to this place being in the county, it was far from the developed entertainment venues of later generations. This cafe was already considered a trendier location. Wendy glanced at the computer next to Jasper that was exactly the same model, but in a different color and said, "Thank you for the computer." Jasper smiled and said, "It's also for the convenience of office use." Wendy looked at Jasper ardently and said, "How did you do it? Why do the stocks you take a fancy to rise so soon and by so much?" Naturally, Jasper could not tell Wendy that he had been reborn and that everything was in his memory. So he just said lightly, "Through more observation, I guess. I usually like to watch the news, plus talent, hard work, and a little luck." Wendy continued, "There's something I'd like to ask for your help." Chapter 9. What's the matter? I want to find an opportunity for you to meet my dad. After Wendy plucked up the courage to finish speaking, she saw Jasper's stunned look. Her glamorous face flushed red as she quickly said, "Don't get me wrong, I don't mean it that way. It's just that my dad has recently become obsessed with financial investment, but he doesn't understand anything and lost a lot of money. I hope you can persuade him or point him in the right direction." Sure enough, it happened. Jasper knew that Wendy was facing a real predicament at this time. He calmly said, "Why should I help you?" Wendy was stunned. Ever since she was young, others would do all kinds of things for her, especially people of the opposite sex, as they would rush to please her. Was that not done out of their own volition? However, Jasper was right. There was no relationship between the two. Moreover, Jasper was a veritable multimillionaire now, and his future was limitless. To put it plainly, they just used to be classmates, so why should Jasper help her? Wendy smiled bitterly and was just about to apologize when Jasper continued, "I'm quite busy during this period and the crude oil market may start at any time. Wait for a while, and I'll go back with you later." Jasper's words made Wendy's mood swing high and low like she was riding on a roller coaster. Looking at Jasper in front of her, who had a calm smile, Wendy could not help asking, "Why are you helping me?" Jasper shrugged and said, "Maybe because we're classmates. I'll help whenever I can." Wendy looked at the ever-calm Jasper. A knowing smile appeared on her face, and she nodded heavily. In the evening, Jasper went home in Wendy's car. It was not surprising for a person of Wendy's identity to own a car, and it was a BMW 3 Series worth $50,000 to $60,000. It was an incredibly luxurious car for ordinary people, but for Wendy, it was the car of the lowest profile that her family could find for her. This inspired Jasper to buy a car as soon as possible. Back home, Jasper exhaled gloomily, picked up the mobile phone, and called John Jackson. "Brother, I heard you made a lot of money today." "Congrats." John answered the phone instantly and said with a laugh. Jasper laughed lightly and said, "It's all small money. John, I need to trouble you this time." Jasper intended to move to a different place. After all, Penelope always came here to pester him. And besides, now that he had the money, he wanted to change his house as well. "I have a house in Pioneer Homes right now. For some personal reasons, I'm planning to sell this house. Later, I'm also planning to get another 2 houses. Can you introduce to me any reliable agents?" This material belongs to noveldrama.org. Upon hearing this, John immediately replied, "It's just a small matter. I'll send you the number in a while. Let me talk to them first, and they'll definitely help you get things done." "Thank you, John. Let's have dinner in a couple of days," Jasper said with a smile. It was originally just a polite remark from Jasper, but John seemed to have thought of something and immediately chuckled. "There really is a chance to have dinner in a few days, but I'm not sure if you'd be interested in it. There are several investors in the city who dabble in stocks and futures. They're considered big players in their respective circles. We hold an exchange meeting every once in a while. To put it bluntly, it's to maintain a relationship with them. In business, especially in finance, contacts and intelligence are very important. As for the last time when you played the futures for mung beans, it made many people wonder who you are. So, during the exchange meeting that will be held in a couple of days, I'd like to invite you to join me. I wonder if you'd be interested?" Listening to John's words, Jasper understood. In his previous life, he was in the financial industry and was no stranger to the small upper-level financial circle of this city. The members of this circle were leaders in their respective fields. It could be said that this group of people dominated the city's financial circle, and a stomp of their feet would cause a big earthquake. However, he was just a low-level employee of a financial company in his previous life who could only get some information from other people's hearsay and be envious about it. In this lifetime, he did not expect to get the opportunity to join this circle. From John's words, he was obviously a member of this circle and had a certain status as he wanted to bring Jasper into this circle. After living 2 lives, Jasper, who knew exactly how important personal connections were, did not refuse and readily agreed. After exchanging a few more polite remarks and agreeing on a time, they hung up the phone. Busy times flew by and a few days passed in a flash. In the past few days, the international crude oil market had not yet arrived and several important happenings had not yet reached the time of the outbreak. So Jasper focused most of his energy on the domestic stock market. With the memory of his previous life, it was like Jasper had a cheat code and his assets skyrocketed every day. Any stock he chose would inevitably increase in price until it hit the daily limit. The overall profit rate had almost reached an appalling figure. The principal of 1.6 million became 5 million in just a few days. Wendy's 200,000 also became 600,000. The speed of making money was not about making money any longer, but about printing money. The news about the local stock gods spread like wildfire, and some people who got inside information knelt in front of Jasper's record. Most of them were indifferent, thinking that it was an erroneous rumor. How could there be a 100% accuracy when buying stocks? Jasper did not care about the gossip and rumors that went on in the outside world. He was trying on a suit. This was the day he made an appointment with John to attend a banquet. When Wendy found out about it, she insisted on bringing Jasper out to buy a suit. Coming out of the fitting room, Jasper's appearance made everyone's eyes, including Wendy's, light up. Jasper was quite handsome, and his sharply defined eyes and eyebrows looked very masculine. Although his figure was not extremely muscular, it was well-proportioned. This suit was worn on his body as if it was made for Jasper. It fitted perfectly like a glove. Besides, his shoulders were broad and his back was straight. His entire appearance was refreshing. "How is it?" Jasper asked as he stood in front of the mirror. "Handsome," Wendy commented. "Bill, please." "Handsome and rich." The salesperson's eyes were shining when looking at Jasper, but when they looked at Wendy next to Jasper, they could only sigh. After all, most people had self-awareness. Few women could maintain self-confidence in front of Wendy. She was too outstanding and could crush the opponent thoroughly. After Jasper bought the clothes, he looked at Wendy next to him and suddenly pulled her to the Cartier store next door. "Wendy, let's go in and have a look." Seeing Jasper walking into the Cartier store, Wendy was stunned for a moment, but did not think too much and went in with him. Wendy thought that Jasper wanted to buy a watch to enhance his poise, but unexpectedly, he looked back at her. "Wendy, I'll buy you a gift." Jasper smiled lightly. In his last life, Jasper did not even have the courage to pursue Wendy Schuler and was very humble. Now that they met again, and he even had the capital to pursue her, Jasper naturally wanted to seize the opportunity. While saying that, he disregarded Wendy's stunned gaze and raised his head to say to the salesperson, "Do you carry the Etincelle de Cartier collection necklace in your store?" When Jasper asked this question, both Wendy and the salesperson were stunned. After all, the necklace of this series was not affordable for ordinary people. This necklace would cost nearly $1 million, and in this era, it was enough to buy a few houses. Before they could react, another couple who were looking at the jewelry at the Cartier counter suddenly turned their eyes to the two of them. Chapter 10. The man was dressed in casual clothes, but he wore an impressive Cartier men's watch on his wrist that was also valuable. As for the woman next to him, she was pestering him to buy her a bracelet. "Felix, why won't you buy this for me? It's not expensive. It's only a little more than $30,000. You spend more than that in a card game." Felix ignored the woman next to him and stared fixedly at Wendy instead. "Wendy Schuler?" Felix called out. Felix did not expect that after graduating from high school, he would still meet his dream lover here. He and Wendy were classmates from high school. He had already frantically pursued Wendy at that time, but it was a pity that Wendy did not even give him a chance. After going to university, Wendy went directly to the capital to study at a university with her excellent grades. Although Felix had some money in the family, they were not able to send him to that kind of university, so he was arranged to go abroad instead. After years of absence, Wendy became a real beauty. Though she was a bit less youthful than he remembered, she was more mature and feminine. Felix's heart jumped wildly. He wished to get Wendy immediately. Facing Felix, Wendy frowned slightly and then said something that made Felix extremely depressed. "You are?" Without a doubt, Wendy had forgotten all about him. "I'm Felix West. We were classmates in high school. At that time, I sent you love letters every day." Felix walked to Wendy and said with a smile. Hearing this name, Jasper also remembered who he was. During high school, there was indeed such a character by the name of Felix West. He was a typical second generation from a rich family. He went abroad for university, and they never met again after that. The reason why he had a deep impression of him was that Felix often bullied him when he was in high school. "Felix West, it's you?" When he finally remembered and smiled politely. At the same time, she also recalled that Felix often bullied Jasper when they were studying. She quickly said, "I didn't expect to meet you here, but I still have a lot of things to do today. So let's talk another time." After speaking, Wendy pulled Jasper along and said, "Jasp, let's go. Don't buy me any gifts. I really don't need it." Wendy's words, combined with her intimate actions and address toward Jasper, made Felix immediately focus on Jasper. Looking at Jasper, Felix found him to be more familiar with each passing second. Jasper Lane? Felix suddenly recalled who Jasper was, and his expression became very animated. "Isn't this the poor wretch from high school? How did you two get so close?" In the second half of the sentence, Felix's tone and demeanor were almost reproachful. It was as if Jasper had desecrated his goddess just by standing beside Wendy. At this time, Lindy Manson, the female companion brought by Felix, also came over. "Felix, who is this person?" Lindy asked. "A classmate from high school." Felix sneered with disdain. He was the poorest dude in the entire high school, wearing the same school uniform every day and only eating 2 meals a day that consisted of bread and jam. He was also often bullied. I thought he looked quite pitiful, so I occasionally let him run errands for me and rewarded him a few dollars. After speaking, Felix looked at Jasper cheerfully. With a sense of superiority in his eyes, he continued to belittle Jasper in front of Wendy. "Jasper, am I right?" "Yes, you are." Jasper's straightforward response was out of Felix's expectations. "My family had always been in a difficult state, so it was impossible for me to have much pocket money when I was studying. It's good that I even had enough to eat, so I'm very grateful for my parents' hard work." In Jasper's view, Being poor was not a fault, let alone a shameful thing. It was because of poverty that they had to work hard to make money. To be precise, those big figures who truly reached the pinnacle were those who started off from the lowest point. Jasper's open-mindedness made Wendy look at him with higher regard, and she could not help her gaze from focusing on Jasper. This scene angered Felix even more. With a mocking smile, Felix said sarcastically, "After a few years, the boring recluse with low self-esteem has become talkative and a show-off. I heard that you're looking for a necklace from the Edsel de Cartier collection when you came in just now. I know that necklace, but it's very expensive. Can you afford it?" As he said that, Felix shook his wrist and said, "See this watch here? I bought it here for 200,000. Have you ever seen so much money in your life? Even I don't dare to say that I can buy that necklace, let alone you. Wendy, although he's also our old classmate, you have to see things clearly. What future can you have with this wretched bloke? He'll only drag you down. With your appearance and ability, you can find a man far better than him." Lindy already bore deep hostility against Wendy just because of Felix's attitude toward her. Immediately, she bragged, "Yes, as a woman, we must look around carefully when finding a boyfriend. Just look at me being all lovey-dovey with Felix. A few days ago, he gave me an LV handbag that cost more than 10,000. And today, he's going to buy me a Cartier bracelet. A poor man like this, what can he buy you? Even if you go out for breakfast, he can't afford eggs and ham on that piece of toast, right?" Wendy did not say anything and merely glanced at Lindy with pity. In Wendy's opinion, when a woman reached the point where she had to brag about the man she was relying on having money, it was a very sad thing. This pitiful look made Lindy, who felt inferior after being crushed by Wendy's appearance and temperament, surprisingly angry. "This is not the place for poor people like you. Get out," Lindy shouted directly. Jasper said lightly, "Does this Cartier store belong to you? What right do you have to tell us to go out?" With that said, Jasper turned to the salesperson who was at a loss on how to handle these two groups of customers. He said, "Do you have any necklaces from the Edsel de Cartier series here?" Felix scoffed. "Still pretending? So disgusting." The salesperson bit the bullet and said, "Yes. And it's the last one in the entire region, too." With that said, the salesperson hurriedly took out the necklace. Cartier's Edsel series was the more famous collection. 36 perfectly cut diamonds surrounded the necklace, and in the middle, there was a pink diamond that no woman could refuse. The value of these diamonds alone exceeded $400,000. As soon as this necklace appeared, even Wendy, who was used to seeing jewelry, was amazed, not to mention Lindy, who was staring at it in a daze. In contrast, the bracelet that she pestered Felix to buy for her earlier was simply a piece of rubbish on the side of the road. However, Felix was still reluctant to buy that rubbish bracelet for her. "The necklace is here, but can a poor wretch like you afford to buy it?" Lindy sneered. Felix snorted and said, "You don't have to pay to look at it. Maybe this bum is just fulfilling his gratification. Since he ran into us, he was forced into a corner and can't turn the situation around." Chapter 11. Try it on. Jasper ignored the two of them and said to Wendy with a smile. In the last life, he dared not get close to Wendy, but this life was different. He was rich and would be even richer in the future. When a man did not have to think about his financial situation, he would naturally exude a fascinating self-confidence, not to mention Jasper, who had led two lives. As Wendy said before, the two completely different temperaments of maturity and youth were intertwined. It was like a drug that made women unable to extricate themselves. Looking at the necklace lying in the jewelry box, it looked even more radiant under the bright light of the Cartier counter. When he felt a little flustered, it was not because of the valuable price tag of $800,000, however. As the daughter of the richest man in the province, this was not enough to shock her. It was mainly because under Jasper's gaze, Winnie felt incredibly nervous. It was not appropriate to put her hands anywhere, and she dared not even look at Jasper straight in the eye. She could only turn her gaze away and say in a panic, "This is too expensive. Why would a man give a necklace worth $800,000 to the opposite sex? Even a fool would understand." With her mind in a mess, Wendy only felt flustered and subconsciously wanted to escape. At this moment, Jasper picked up the necklace, stood in front of Wendy, and said softly, "Lower your head. I'll put it on for you." Jasper's voice was very gentle, but with a power of reassurance. Wendy subconsciously obeyed his orders. The skin on the back of Wendy's neck was white and delicate with some mischievous green veins scattered around. The distance between the two was very close, and Wendy could feel the masculinity of Jasper's body. As for Jasper, he was intoxicated by Wendy's faint maiden fragrance. Watching this scene, Felix's expression darkened. He had already viewed Wendy as his woman in his heart. Right now, Jasper was acting so intimately with Wendy in front of him. The more hateful thing was that Wendy did not resist at all. "Damn it. If you can't buy it later, you'll get it from me," Felix thought inwardly. After gently helping Wendy put on the necklace, Jasper took a step back and looked at it carefully before praising, "Beautiful." Wendy was already very beautiful, but this necklace was able to accentuate her skin and temperament even more. When Wendy raised her head wearing this necklace, she seemed to be the most elegant and exquisite goddess. There was nothing more beautiful than her at this moment. Looking at her reflection in the mirror that was being held by the salesperson, Wendy only saw her flushed cheeks and her moist, shy eyes. This was not her usual self at all. She totally looked like a silly little girl having her first crush. Wendy was a little angry about her lack of resistance in front of Jasper. "It is beautiful, but can you afford to buy it?" Felix sneered. "If you can't, then get out of here quickly. Stop embarrassing yourself here. It's not your fault you're poor, but it's wrong to be poor and still be pretentious in a place like this. It's fine if you make a fool of yourself, but why drag Wendy along with you?" Wendy glanced at Felix and said stiffly, "Felix, I never thought about asking Jasper to buy me a gift, so you don't have to agitate him. We won't fall for it. Jasper, let's go." Wendy did not want Jasper to buy her a necklace, just because of a moment of anger. After mediating the situation, she was about to take off the necklace and leave. However, Jasper stood still and held Wendy's hand as he chuckled lightly. "It's really beautiful. You don't have to take it off. Swipe the card." Jasper then handed his card over. "Ha!" Felix laughed wildly. "Do you have 800,000 in your card? Are you done pretending already? Are you going to say you got the wrong card when the transaction fails later? This is really embarrassing. I'm going to die from laughter. You look very calm on the surface, but you must be jumping in panic, right?" "Ha!" Lindy stretched out her hand to hold Felix's arm and said with a smile, "That's right. Both are men, but the gap is so big. Felix can always buy what he wants without any hesitation." While they were mocking, the salesperson had already taken the credit card machine and swiped the card. 800,000. The transaction was successful. Felix and Lindy's laughter suddenly stopped as if their throats were pinched and their faces were blank. Especially Felix. He refused to believe that Jasper could really afford this necklace. Even the salesperson was shocked. This necklace had been on their counter for half a year. Many people had seen it, but no one in this town had the financial resources to buy a necklace for 800,000. Did something go wrong? This poor bum can't afford it. Felix asked the salesperson with a grim expression. The salesperson shook her head and said, "It's impossible. We've received the transaction slip. People can make mistakes, but the machine given by the bank can't be wrong." "How could it be?" Felix glared at Jasper fiercely, stunned on the spot. "Maybe you think this necklace is invaluable, but in my eyes, 800,000 is not as precious as Wendy's smile." While speaking, Jasper pulled Wendy along. She was dumbfounded by the sudden wave of sweet words. They then turned to leave together. These words, like a crisp and loud slap, made Felix's face swell up. Thinking of his taunting before, as well as Jasper's words now, Felix only felt that his face was hot and painful. Wendy was also shocked by Jasper's last domineering remarks. It was not until Jasper pulled her away from the counter that she came back to her senses. She said softly, "It's really too expensive. Besides, I'm not ready yet." "Ready for what?" Jasper asked. "Huh." Wendy looked at Jasper blankly. That was right. What was she going to be ready for? Somehow, Wendy felt her cheeks growing hot. She became shy. She stomped her feet in annoyance and said, "You're deliberately teasing me." "Huh?" Jasper laughed and said, Just treat this as a welcome gift. It's not a special thing, and it doesn't have any special meaning. Just accept it. It doesn't mean anything, and I don't require you to make any promises." Upon hearing this, Wendy fell into a new wave of dilemma. What was the meaning of his words just now? Why did it not mean anything, and what promises was he talking about? Was she looking too much into it, or was he angry with her? Was he going to pursue her? Should she agree? In short, he was really different from other men. With jumbled thoughts, Wendy subconsciously reached out and gently stroked the pink diamond on the necklace on her chest. She felt a little dazed for a while. After living 2 lives, how could Jasper fail to notice the changes in Wendy's expression? Naturally, he could guess what she was thinking. This feeling was really amazing. In his previous life, he did not have the courage to speak in front of her. But in this life, she was obsessed with him on her own accord. However, Jasper was not too anxious. After all, the relationship between the two should progress slowly. Besides, there were more important things to do. "Wendy, let's go. We need to attend the banquet." "Okay." Wendy nodded heartily as her thoughts went wild along the way. Chapter 12. Royce Villa. It was the most famous private club in the local area. It was said that the boss behind the scenes was a formidable figure with a very strong background. Jasper had heard of this place in his previous life. At that time, the boss of his company was a member here. As for the boss behind the scenes of Royce Villa, he was naturally not qualified to get in touch with him. Now, standing at the entrance of Royce Villa, he already possessed the capability to be ranked among the top financial circles in the city. "Jasper, you're finally here." John Jackson smiled and greeted him with a beautiful female companion by his side. On this sort of occasion, the protagonists were the men, but there were many ways for men to show their strength. The quality of the women around them was one of the most powerful ways. However, the female companion John brought was completely crushed by Wendy from all angles. "John, thank you for giving me such a chance." John waved his hand and said, "I know your capabilities. Even if you didn't have me, sooner or later, you'll still enter this kind of circle. I'm just doing this for you in advance. Many people have arrived inside. Everyone is talking about your recent performance in the mung bean futures market. Why don't we go in together?" John said with a smile. "Sure." Jasper nodded with no show of anxiety. By his side, Wendy held his arm, looking as bright as a star. She attracted the admiration of many men along the way. In terms of identity, Wendy's background was stronger than most people present. After all, her father was the richest man in the province, so Wendy also showed no anxiety and acted very graciously. John led Jasper to a small circle. 4 or 5 men in suits and leather shoes were talking and laughing. Not far away, their female companions chatted. Wendy was very eye-catching, and after saying hello to everyone with Jasper, she went to the group of female companions to foster some relationships. "Brother, how's this assistant of yours?" John muttered in Jasper's ear in a low voice. "Not bad," Jasper chuckled in response. John probably did not know Wendy's identity. Otherwise, he would not dare to assign Wendy as his assistant. After all, the daughter of the richest man in the province was enough to scare some people out of their wits. "Everyone, this is the stock god that everybody is talking about." John's words attracted everyone's attention. Instantly, several eyes that were filled with scrutiny, curiosity, or cynicism fell on Jasper. No matter what they thought, everyone was surprised by Jasper's youthfulness. Everyone present was at least in their mid-30s, and Jasper Lane, a young man in his early 20s, stood above the crowd. "Is this the man who created a miracle in the mung bean futures market some time ago?" A middle-aged man asked curiously. John grinned and said, "Naturally. His account is opened in our commercial bank." "Why should I lie to you? I must get to know this person then." "My name is Kai Jones, president of Ascenda's Investment." Kai smiled and stretched out his hand with a friendly expression on his face. "Jasper Lane." Jasper responded curtly and shook hands with the other party. With his previous glorious record, Jasper easily made his initial integration into this circle. After all, anyone would be willing to flatter an outstanding person. Not everyone could use a capital of 800,000 and earn 13.6 million in 5 months. Therefore, The people present were also very curious about Jasper. At this time, John said triumphantly, "You don't know this yet. Some time ago, this brother of mine entered the stock market with 1.6 million and tripled it in just a few days." Wow! Incredible! The people present looked at Jasper differently. If the success of one investment was based on luck, then the second success in a short time was strength. Besides, he got 3 times the profit. Few people present had the confidence to do this. As expected of the god of stocks, Kai exclaimed, "When I was your age, I was still bragging in the disco every day. I didn't have your skills back then. You're too kind. With this small ability of mine, how can I be worthy of that title? Some people will think that it's a joke," Jasper said modestly. Just when Jasper was talking and laughing with a bunch of bosses within the city's financial circle, a group of people arrived at the entrance of the banquet hall. Next to Hugh Lewis was Penelope Hunt, who was holding his arm. Rickton White followed behind them. A few days ago, Penelope lost a lot of money because of the stocks recommended by Rickton. She had been pestering Rickton to get the money back. However, Rickton did not have that much money to spare, so he introduced her to Hugh. He told her that as long as she could obtain Hugh's approval, not to mention hundreds of thousands, but even millions would not be a problem. Who was Penelope Hunt? Money was more important to her than anything else. As long as she had money, she was willing to do anything. Besides, the man she met this time was Hugh Lewis. She felt that as long as she could get hold of Hugh, she would definitely not be short of money in the future. Hugh felt that Penelope was good-looking and sensible, so he took her to this banquet to let her experience his ability and status. "Oh my, it's too luxurious here. I haven't even seen these decorations before," Penelope said excitedly. After she returned this time, she would brag about this so hard. After all, being able to enter Royce Villa was a symbol of status. She murmured, "Just how big is this place? This hall alone is as big as 3 or 4 houses combined. This villa must cost at least tens of millions." Rickton could not help scorning at her words. "You're really ignorant. The decorations alone cost tens of millions. If you don't know anything, talk less and read more. Stop making a fool of yourself." Penelope quickly shut her mouth, knowing that she could not afford to offend anyone here. Hugh's arrival attracted the attention of many people. Although they belonged in the same circle, they were also divided into the strong and the weak. Hugh was undoubtedly the strongest one. At this time, he was in full swing. Lantern Capital was well known throughout the province. As soon as he appeared, people who wanted to fawn over the powerful would naturally flock to him. "You go to the side first. I need to talk with some old friends," Hugh said to Penelope. Penelope was busy admiring the magnificence here, just like Alice when she entered Wonderland. Of course, she dared not oppose Hugh's instructions, so she obediently agreed and walked away. Looking at Penelope's back, Hugh was quite satisfied. He liked obedient and meek women. Such a woman was worth his time to play with. Penelope walked to the side of the banquet hall and looked at the magnificent decorations here, as well as the luxury brands and jewelry the guests wore. She envied the rich. Rickton wanted to squeeze into the upper-class circle, but he was not worthy at all. Today, if not for Hugh, he would not even be qualified to enter the doors. Thus, after bumping into a few obstacles, he could only return to Penelope's side dejectedly. "Rickton, look at that cake. It has 12 layers. I've never seen such a big cake." Penelope admired the giant cake on the dining table not far away. It was the first time she saw such a luxurious cake. She shook her head and said, "I wonder how much it cost?" To hold a banquet like this, it had cost at least $1 million. Rickton knew a little more. He sighed while feeling jealous. This is the real high society. $1 million! Penelope widened her eyes in disbelief. She had never seen so much money in her life. And these rich people were spending that much for a party? "Penelope, do you think that person is Jasper?" Rickton's words suddenly caught Penelope's attention. "Rickton, it must be a mistake. Where do you think this is? How could a poor bloke like Jasper enter?" Before she finished her sentence, Penelope's words were stuck in her throat when she saw Jasper's figure not far away. Chapter 13. She was shocked when she saw Jasper, but she reacted immediately. He must have entered under the banner of someone else. Otherwise, How could he appear at such a high-end party with his abilities? Penelope snorted with a sneer on her face. She walked toward Jasper on her own initiative. Her snooty voice interrupted Jasper, who was chatting with John and the others. "Oh, Jasper, I didn't expect you to be here." This sentence immediately attracted the attention of everyone around him. John frowned and looked at Jasper. However, Jasper remained indifferent. "Acting cool." Penelope sneered and said, "You're nothing but a poor wretch through and through. You actually came here to pretend to be rich? Listen up, he's just a man who relies on women. He only managed to get in here because he found a rich woman. All of you are big figures. Don't be fooled by him." Penelope sneered, thinking that he was being taken care of by Wendy, who she saw that day. Thinking of this, she became irritated and looked at Jasper contemptuously, wanting to see panic and fear on his face. "Jasper, why don't you look in the mirror to see what you look like? Are you qualified to participate in this kind of event?" Jasper looked at Penelope's ugly face and said stoically, "If I'm not, are you?" Penelope curled her lips disdainfully and said, "Of course, I am. I was invited by Mr. Lewis himself. And what about you? Do you think yourself superior just because you found a rich woman? Let me tell you, you've lost even the most basic dignity of a man. Jasper, don't you realize that a lowly person will forever be a lowly person? Even though you're here in a rented suit, you're still inferior." Penelope's tone was harsh and full of contempt. Jasper, who was in the center of the storm, was not as angry as Penelope imagined. He remained extremely cold. For Jasper, Penelope was nothing but a pesky fly that would not leave him alone. She was a little annoying, and her intentions to harm him were simply wishful thinking. At this time, a hearty voice from a middle-aged man sounded. "Penelope, what's wrong?" Hugh walked over. Seeing Hugh, the group of bosses who had talked and laughed with Jasper before all went up to greet him. Even John gave Jasper an apologetic look before going up to greet him. After all, Hugh was in full swing at the moment. They could not afford to offend him. "Nothing. I saw an acquaintance." Penelope looked at Jasper with a sneer, revealing a fearless aura that oozed from every inch of her body. "This guy is actually a poor man. He found a rich woman to bring him here. I was worried that the other bosses were being deceived, so I exposed him." Jasper looked at Penelope and said calmly, "I was brought in by someone else, but you came here on your own?" Penelope sneered and said, "How can you compare yourself to me? I was brought here by Mr. Lewis." Jasper was no stranger to the name Hugh Lewis. He was the most legendary stock god in the city. He used $2,000 back then to enter the market that year and earned $20 million in just a few years. Later, he founded Lantern Capital, which was regarded as the city's first financial company in the truest sense. However, according to his memory, Hugh failed in various investments this year, which caused investors to lose confidence and withdraw from his company. Due to limited funds, Hugh made a desperate move and invested heavily in Tycoon Industry, and then Tycoon Industry was delisted. Hugh lost everything and was sentenced to 14 years in prison for the crime of illegal fundraising. Finally, he committed suicide in prison and died. The reason why Jasper was so impressed with Hugh was not only because he was regarded as a legend in the city, but also because this old fogey was actually a playboy. He heard that he had more than 20 lovers. These were all regular lovers, not counting those who were just for show. Are the people brought by Mr. Lewis better than others? How are you better than me? Jasper said lightly. Hearing this, Penelope hardened her face and pointed at Jasper while cursing. "What are you talking about? Mr. Lewis is a prominent figure. It's my honor to be invited by him. For trash like you who sold yourself for this, you're still acting so arrogantly? How dare you not put Mr. Lewis in your eyes? Jasper, I really think you're conceited and lawless. For an ant like you, Mr. Lewis can crush you countless times with just one finger. That's enough." Hugh glanced at Jasper before saying flatly, "Young people are always ignorant, so I won't pursue this matter with you. But you must remember that you should be humble and prudent when you go out. Some people are not for you to offend. All right, this is indeed not a place for you to be. You should leave now. Don't let me ask the security to drive you away." Penelope smiled triumphantly and said to Jasper, "Did you hear that? Do you want to leave on your own, or do you want to get kicked out? Mr. Lewis, I'm the one who brought Jasper here. John spoke up at this time, sweating profusely. After all, Jasper was introduced by him. If Jasper was really driven away, it would make things difficult for him. John, he's your friend? Hugh frowned. This is my little brother. He's quite capable. Some time ago, he was the mysterious retail investor in the domestic mung bean futures, John explained. This time, Hugh was really surprised. In the financial circle, in addition to stocks, futures was inevitably an area most people would dabble in. Some time ago, the skyrocketing mung bean futures caused many people to become rich or go bankrupt overnight. He also participated, but unfortunately, he forecasted the wrong direction and lost millions. However, the young man in front of him was actually the retail investor who was rumored to build an account at the lowest price and sold at the highest price. He even took away tens of millions of funds? Even so, what did it matter? Thousands in funds, in Hugh's eyes nowadays, was nothing. One successful speculation was nothing more than luck. So it's him, the rumored stock god. Hugh laughed tauntingly and said, "Young people are so capable now. It seems that old guys like us should retire." His words were complimenting Jasper, but there were hostility and disdain between the lines. When these words were spoken, the expressions in the eyes of others became ambiguous. He was a player recognized in this market. Facing a blooming young man like Jasper, he naturally felt contempt for him. It depended on how Jasper would respond. "Mr. Lewis is too kind," Jasper said lightly. Knowing that Hugh was on Penelope's side, he said offhandedly, "The capital market doesn't look at age. If you can earn money just because you're older, then all the old ladies and old men in the nursing homes can be stock gods." Hugh narrowed his eyes as he stared at Jasper with a dangerous glint. He sneered, "No one has dared to talk to me like this for a long time. Mr. Lewis, you're my senior. I should respect you," Jasper said unhurriedly, "but I'm quite familiar with the woman next to you. I was with her for several years." The atmosphere in the crowd fell silent. Some admired Jasper for facing Hugh head-on, while some laughed at Jasper's ignorance. However, no matter who it was, they did not plan to get involved. Jasper actually dared to say such things in front of Hugh. Was he not mocking Hugh for playing with his former woman? Was he looking for death? Chapter 13. She was shocked when she saw Jasper, but she reacted immediately. He must have entered under the banner of someone else. Otherwise, how could he appear at such a high-end party with his abilities? Penelope snorted with a sneer on her face. She walked toward Jasper on her own initiative. Her snooty voice interrupted Jasper, who was chatting with John and the others. "Oh, Jasper, I didn't expect you to be here." This sentence immediately attracted the attention of everyone around him. John frowned and looked at Jasper. However, Jasper remained indifferent. "Acting cool," Penelope sneered and said, "You're nothing but a poor wretch through and through. You actually came here to pretend to be rich? Listen up, he's just a man who relies on women. He only managed to get in here because he found a rich woman. All of you are big figures. Don't be fooled by him." Penelope sneered, thinking that he was being taken care of by Wendy, who she saw that day. Thinking of this, she became irritated and looked at Jasper contemptuously, wanting to see panic and fear on his face. "Jasper, why don't you look in the mirror to see what you look like? Are you qualified to participate in this kind of event?" Jasper looked at Penelope's ugly face and said stoically, "If I'm not, are you?" Penelope curled her lips disdainfully and said, "Of course, I am. I was invited by Mr. Lewis himself. And what about you? Do you think yourself superior just because you found a rich woman? Let me tell you, you've lost even the most basic dignity of a man. Jasper, don't you realize that a lowly person will forever be a lowly person? Even though you're here in a rented suit, you're still inferior." Penelope's tone was harsh and full of contempt. Jasper, who was in the center of the storm, was not as angry as Penelope imagined. He remained extremely cold. For Jasper, Penelope was nothing but a pesky fly that would not leave him alone. She was a little annoying, and her intentions to harm him were simply wishful thinking. At this time, a hearty voice from a middle-aged man sounded. "Penelope, what's wrong?" Hugh walked over. Seeing Hugh, The group of bosses who had talked and laughed with Jasper before all went up to greet him. Even John gave Jasper an apologetic look before going up to greet him. After all, he was in full swing at the moment. They could not afford to offend him. Nothing. I saw an acquaintance. Penelope looked at Jasper with a sneer, revealing a fearless aura that oozed from every inch of her body. This guy is actually a poor man. He found a rich woman to bring him here. I was worried that the other bosses were being deceived, so I exposed him. Jasper looked at Penelope and said calmly, I was brought in by someone else, but you came here on your own? Penelope sneered and said, How can you compare yourself to me? I was brought here by Mr. Lewis. Jasper was no stranger to the name Hugh Lewis. He was the most legendary stock god in the city. He used $2,000 back then to enter the market that year and earned $20 million in just a few years. Later, he founded Lantern Capital, which was regarded as the city's first financial company in the truest sense. However, according to his memory, Hugh failed in various investments this year, which caused investors to lose confidence and withdraw from his company. Due to limited funds, Hugh made a desperate move and invested heavily in Tycoon Industry, and then Tycoon Industry was delisted. Hugh lost everything and was sentenced to 14 years in prison for the crime of illegal fundraising. Finally, he committed suicide in prison and died. The reason why Jasper was so impressed with Hugh was not only because he was regarded as a legend in the city, but also because this old fogey was actually a playboy. He heard that he had more than 20 lovers. These were all regular lovers, not counting those who were just for show. Are the people brought by Mr. Lewis better than others? How are you better than me? Jasper said lightly. Hearing this, Penelope hardened her face and pointed at Jasper while cursing. What are you talking about? Mr. Lewis is a prominent figure. It's my honor to be invited by him. For trash like you who sold yourself for this, you're still acting so arrogantly? How dare you not put Mr. Lewis in your eyes? Jasper, I really think you're conceited and lawless. For an ant like you, Mr. Lewis can crush you countless times with just one finger. That's enough. Hugh glanced at Jasper before saying flatly, Young people are always ignorant, so I won't pursue this matter with you. But you must remember that you should be humble and prudent when you go out. Some people are not for you to offend. All right, this is indeed not a place for you to be. You should leave now. Don't let me ask the security to drive you away. Penelope smiled triumphantly and said to Jasper, Did you hear that? Do you want to leave on your own, or do you want to get kicked out? Mr. Lewis, I'm the one who brought Jasper here. John spoke up at this time, sweating profusely. After all, Jasper was introduced by him. If Jasper was really driven away, it would make things difficult for him. John, he's your friend? Hugh frowned. This is my little brother. He's quite capable. Some time ago, he was a mysterious retail investor in the domestic mung bean futures, John explained. This time, he was really surprised. In the financial circle, in addition to stocks, futures was inevitably an area most people would dabble in. Some time ago, the skyrocketing mung bean futures caused many people to become rich or go bankrupt overnight. He also participated, but unfortunately, he forecasted the wrong direction and lost millions. However, the young man in front of him was actually the retail investor who was rumored to build an account at the lowest price and sold at the highest price. He even took away tens of millions of funds? Even so, what did it matter? Thousands in funds in Hugh's eyes nowadays was nothing. One successful speculation was nothing more than luck. So it's him, the rumored stock god. Hugh laughed tauntingly and said, Young people are so capable now. It seems that old guys like us should retire. His words were complimenting Jasper, but there were hostility and disdain between the lines. When these words were spoken, the expressions in the eyes of others became ambiguous. He was a player recognized in this market. Facing a blooming young man like Jasper, he naturally felt contempt for him. It depended on how Jasper would respond. Mr. Lewis is too kind, Jasper said lightly. Knowing that Hugh was on Penelope's side, he said offhandedly, The capital market doesn't look at age. If you can earn money just because you're older, then all the old ladies and old men in the nursing homes can be stock gods. Hugh narrowed his eyes as he stared at Jasper with a dangerous glint. He sneered, No one has dared to talk to me like this for a long time. Mr. Lewis, you're my senior. I should respect you, Jasper said unhurriedly. But I'm quite familiar with the woman next to you. I was with her for several years. The atmosphere in the crowd fell silent. Some admired Jasper for facing Hugh head-on, while some laughed at Jasper's ignorance. However, no matter who it was, they did not plan to get involved. Jasper actually dared to say such things in front of Hugh. Was he not mocking Hugh for playing with his former woman? Was he looking for death? Chapter 14. Ha, kiddo. Hugh was silent for a moment. Then he laughed out loud. Young man, it seems that you're very arrogant. Stock god or not, it's just a title. I don't care for it. But if someone wants to act all high and mighty because of a woman, then I can't be bothered with it, Jasper retorted again. The reason was simple, because Penelope was using Hugh to try and dominate him. Others may be afraid of Hugh, but not Jasper. The current Hugh Lewis had reached a turning point where his prosperity was bound to decline. Several of his investments would be in trouble in the second half of the year, and all of them would go bust, which would eventually lead to a break in the capital chain of Lantern Capital. Moreover, in Jasper's opinion, Hugh's downfall would happen sooner or later. With such a personality, who else would die if not him? Young man, it's useless to talk big. Since everyone is here and the market will open in half an hour, why don't we make a bet? We'll choose a stock each and see which has the bigger gain. We shall see if I'm getting old or if you're simply too arrogant. Hugh looked at Jasper with a sneer, obviously angry. Mr. Lewis, this is... John stepped forward as mediator. To others, Jasper was still young and inexperienced after all. How could he be an opponent for an old fox like Hugh Lewis? John admired Jasper very much, and he was also a big customer of his. Whether for official or private reasons, he could not watch Jasper suffer such a big loss. John, shut up if you don't want any trouble, Hugh barked, making John back away with an ugly expression. Do you dare to? Hugh looked at Jasper with scorching eyes. Of course. Jasper's words astonished the others. Not only did he agree to the bet, but he also added to the stakes. But I plan to add something more. You don't mind, do you? Kid, don't think you're standing at the top of the world just because you've earned some money. Do you have more money than me? Hugh laughed. Jasper ignored him, turned around and said to John, John, the ruby pendant I'm keeping in your bank, please send someone to fetch it for me. I'll bet on that ruby pendant, and I hope Mr. Lewis can match it. Okay, no matter how much it is, I'll take on the bet. Hugh scoffed. How much would a ruby pendant cost? Sure enough, as expected of a poor wretch, even the stakes were so tacky. John immediately made a call and got someone to bring the ruby pendant to Royce Villa. Penelope, who was standing next to Hugh, suddenly recalled this item. He bought the ruby pendant for 500,000, Penelope said to Hugh. Hugh was startled for a moment before bursting into laughter. 500,000? Are you kidding me? If you lack this amount, I'll give it to you. Are you not ashamed to take it out for a bet? As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's expressions seemed to be holding back a smile. Even their gazes toward Jasper were filled with mockery. In this era, although 500,000 was not a small sum, who were the people present? 500,000 in this scenario was really not worth mentioning. The commercial bank was not that far from Royce Villa, and because President Jackson had personally given the instructions, an employee soon came with the ruby pendant. After getting the pendant, Jasper said to Hugh indifferently, "This pendant is called the Chance Ruby. It was once worn by Queen Victoria. It's considered a rare treasure by now. The market value is at least 30 million. In an auction, the value will be higher. Is it enough for me to make a bet with this?" When these words fell, everyone was silent for a moment. Penelope then took the lead to laugh wildly. "Ha ha, this Jasper Lane is not only arrogant, but also delusional. I think he's crazy about money. He obviously bought something worth 500,000, but he's saying it's worth 30 million. Why don't you say 300 million? This fool really believes in the marketing gimmick of the jewelry shop's owner. The boss said that this pendant was worn by Queen Victoria. I didn't expect that there would be someone in the world who really believes in it." Penelope looked at Jasper pitifully and mocked. "Jasper, don't be stupid. What the boss of the jewelry shop said is just a scam. If this pendant really belonged to Queen Victoria, how could it be sold for only 500,000? Only a fool like you would buy it." John was one of the few people who did not laugh at Jasper. His expression was full of embarrassment. Seeing Jasper so confident, there was not a shred of a guilty conscience when he faced a room of people ridiculing him. John's eyes shifted about, and he pulled over an old man in his 50s from the crowd. "Mr. Landon, you own an auction house and have been in the antique business for so many years. Why don't you look at how much this pendant is worth?" "Very well. Let me look at it then." The old man by the name of Mr. Landon nodded. He approached Jasper and said, "Can you show me the ruby pendant?" Jasper nodded and handed the pendant to him directly. The old man took the item and observed it carefully. Everyone saw his expression changing from casual to solemn. Then, he started breathing rapidly as his wrinkled face became flushed with excitement. "Mister, stop looking at it." The fool Jasper must have been deceived. "I think 500,000 is already overdoing it, let alone 30 million, Penelope said to Mr. Landon. "Shut up if you don't know anything," Mr. Landon shouted abruptly, making Penelope's face turn white with shock. The people who were still laughing at Jasper were all stunned. Hugh narrowed his eyes and said, "Mr. Landon, what do you mean?" Mr. Landon dared not chastise Hugh. He sighed and looked at the ruby pendant in his hand. He then said something that made the whole room change the look on their faces. "Mr. Lewis, this ruby pendant is genuine. It's indeed a ruby pendant worn by Queen Victoria, called the Chance Ruby. The most recent record of it was in the hands of a duke, but there was no news of it later. It must have changed hands after that. I didn't expect it to reappear today." Mr. Landon sighed as he stroked the jewelry in his hand. Then, he carefully returned it to Jasper. "Mr. Lane, if you're interested in selling it, you can choose my auction house. If this item is auctioned out, it can definitely be the finale. I can give you the best price in terms of commission," Mr. Landon said sincerely. "Thank you," Jasper said with a smile. "Mr. Landon, are you sure it's not a mistake? If it's genuine, how could it be sold for 500,000? Hugh frowned at this. Mr. Landon's face straightened as he said confidently, "I've been in this industry for most of my life. I've never made a mistake since I officially entered the industry. I can't be wrong. The price that Mr. Lane quoted is still undervalued. According to the current market, the Chance Ruby is worth at least 35 million. Chapter 15. As soon as this remark was uttered, everyone was shocked. The people who mocked him before could no longer laugh. The venue was filled with sounds of gasps. An item bought for 500,000 could be sold for 35 million. 35 million. At this moment, even those wealthy bosses were jealous. The ones who were most incredulous were Penelope and Rickton. Their faces were distorted with jealousy. No one knew better than them, for they had watched Jasper buy this ruby pendant for 500,000. At that time, they even laughed at Jasper for being cheated of his money. Now, it turned out that the ruby pendant was actually worth 35 million. Penelope's heart was dripping with blood. They both felt that this piece of jewelry should belong to them, and that 35 million was also theirs. "Jasper Lane, why didn't you say that this piece of ruby is so valuable?" Penelope pointed at Jasper and screamed, "Are you crazy, or is there something wrong with your brain?" Jasper said coldly, "Why should I tell you how much it's worth? You've earned so much now. You must give me at least half of it." Penelope said angrily, "Moron!" After spitting out the word, Jasper could not be bothered with her any longer. Penelope felt as if countless poisonous insects were gnawing at her heart. That was 35 million. She should have a share of it. She used to be Jasper's girlfriend, and they almost got married. Hugh narrowed his eyes at Jasper and said grimly, "You're a lucky kid." Hugh did not care for 500,000, but 35 million was different. No one would really question Mr. Landon's professionalism. If he said that was the price, then it had to be true. "Is the bet still on?" Jasper said casually. With a sneer, Hugh said, "Since you brought it to the doorstep, why should I refuse? Find someone to bring 2 computers." After speaking, Hugh immediately took out a checkbook. After writing a check, he tore it off, put it on the table, and sneered, "A check for 35 million. Right here." Jasper did not hesitate to put the ruby pendant next to the check and said lightly, "Let's get started." Hugh felt that Jasper was handing out his money to him, but why should Jasper not feel the same in return? It just so happened that the crude oil market had not started yet, and Jasper's capital of 12 million was still too little. With the addition of 35 million in ammunition, he could instantly complete the accumulation of his base capital and start the next step of his business plan. By betting on stocks, Jasper, who brought his past memory with him after being reborn, could kill Hugh within seconds with his eyes closed. Very soon, someone came over with 2 laptops and switched on the software. At this moment, it was 5 minutes before the market opened. Everyone gathered around. This was a huge bet of 70 million. Even if they were all wealthy, they were still stunned by this number. A gamble worth 70 million. Ordinary people dared not think about it for a lifetime. Jasper, be cautious. John walked to Jasper's side and said worriedly, Hugh made his fortune from the stock market. His foresight is experienced and ruthless. He rarely makes a mistake. Why don't we just forget it? It's not a big deal to lose a little dignity. You still have a chance. It's not worth it to take a fall here. Jasper knew John was being considerate. After all, no one was optimistic about his chances, including John. However, Jasper would not back down. He said, Don't worry. I'm confident. Seeing Jasper's resolute attitude, John sighed and said nothing more. Since he knew that Jasper put all 12 million into the crude oil futures account and increased the leverage by 50 times, he already knew that this young man was very decisive. He did not care about other people's opinions at all. When he also approached at one point, seeing her hesitation, Jasper smiled and said, Are you also going to persuade me to give up and say it's not worth taking the risk for my dignity? Wendy showed him a smile, one that looked like there were 100 flowers blooming. She whispered, No, I believe you'll win. Jasper chuckled lightly and said, Thank you for your trust. Penelope, who was standing not far away next to Hugh, was staring at Jasper bitterly. She said with a sneer, What a shameless couple. You'll be crying in a moment. Just as Penelope's words fell, Wendy stood up from Jasper's side. With such a lively atmosphere here, Wendy noticed that Jasper had become the target of everyone's attacks and ridicules. The instigator was this Penelope Hunt. Are you Penelope Hunt? Wendy looked at Penelope expressionlessly. Under such circumstances, not everyone would dare to stand and speak up. As the daughter of the richest man in the province, Wendy's intensity was undoubtedly powerful. After all, speaking of her identity and background, none of the people present were a match for her. With her powerful aura and perfect features, everyone dared not look down on this girl who had suddenly appeared. Perhaps her aura as the daughter of the richest man was too intimidating, or perhaps Wendy was too beautiful, so Penelope felt a little scared when facing Wendy. However, she now had Hugh behind her back. She mustered the courage to stand up. So what if I am? I don't know why you bear such intense hatred against Jasper, but I want to remind you as a fellow woman that you shouldn't turn yourself into an unreasonable and mean lady. And don't bully others by virtue of someone else. That will only make others look down on you even more. Seeing Penelope turning pale with those 2 sentences, Wendy became more confident. This was the first time she stepped forward because she disagreed with other people's actions. She did not understand the grudge between Penelope and Jasper, but she could see Penelope's scheming personality. If a woman doesn't even have a bottom line, what does it matter if you can win the favors of men? That's just a temporary act of charity from others. Wendy's words were like a knife in Penelope's heart. Although the scene was silent, most of the men present cheered for Wendy from the bottom of their hearts. In this era, most of the people standing here were rich first generations who started from scratch. They understood the hardships of starting from the bottom. Wendy's words were simple and straightforward, but they explained the simplest truth. For example, was a woman like Penelope Hunt really worth anything? It could be said that no man, including Hugh Lewis, would put her in his eyes. To put it bluntly, she was just a bully because she had the backing. You! Penelope gritted her teeth furiously. She pointed at Wendy and screamed. Who are you to say this to me? Are you qualified? Aren't you just another pretty face? I wonder how many men you've slept with in the dark? Everyone's climbing into a man's bed. So why are you nobler than me? Chapter 16. Although Penelope was reluctant to admit so, she knew that comparing Wendy to her would just be like comparing a swan to an ugly duckling. Overcome with low self-esteem and jealousy, words began spilling out of her mouth uncontrollably. Wendy was not angered by Penelope's insults. She simply shook her head. It can't be helped. You take pride in sleeping with other men, but do you think all women are like you? I'm sorry, I'm not a woman like that, she said. Everyone was immersed in the way Wendy carried herself. Ever since she appeared, Hugh had been staring at her lustfully. Even if he were to disregard her angelic beauty, she trumped all his other women with her elegant demeanor. How could he miss out on a woman like that? Well said. Hugh, who had already fallen for Wendy's charms, was the first to shout out supportively. Penelope's face paled. She looked at the man beside her in disbelief. Why was he supporting Wendy Schuler? Could he not see that she was scolding her? Nevertheless, Hugh did not have the slightest interest in Penelope at all at this moment. He walked over to Wendy with a smile on his face. Miss, my name is Hugh Lewis. I'm the chairman of Lantern Capital, he said. Based on Hugh's experience, every time he told women his identity, they would show him their prettiest smile and fawn all over him. However, Wendy did not do so. She took a step back, giving off an imminent sense of isolation. Even the way her brows curved into a frown was breathtakingly gorgeous. I'm sorry, I don't know you. I don't intend to get to know you either, she said. Hugh's identity clearly meant nothing in front of the daughter of the wealthiest man in the province. Although Hugh did not know her background, his interest in her grew. This was the first time he got rejected by a woman after starting up his business. This sense of excitement and curiosity reminded him of his impulsive behavior back in his youthful days. I think that we can get to know each other better. Jasper pulled Wendy to his side while he was speaking. Mr. Lewis, she's my date. You're talking too much, Jasper said lightly, putting Wendy behind him. Talking too much. Everyone looked around awkwardly. Although they all found Hugh's behavior unsightly and inappropriate, no one had the nerves to call him out except for Jasper. Hugh's expression darkened instantly. He stared at Jasper with a brute, lethal glint in his eyes. Wendy did not expect Jasper to stand up for her. A pool of warmth formed in her heart. However, she knew about Hugh's position and abilities. She came close to Jasper and softly whispered into his ear, Jasp, I don't feel well. Why don't we leave first? Jasper understood her at once. She wanted to help him escape this difficult situation. She stood up for him, as she could not stand the way Penelope insulted and taunted him. Now, she wanted to help him out of this as well. A woman like this was so much better than Penelope Hunt. Right then, a warm sensation washed over Jasper's heart. Not only was Wendy beautiful and well-mannered, but she was also warm-hearted and meticulous. However, Jasper could not retreat right now. Jasper looked at Hugh's aggressive stance. The game is not over yet. How can I leave? He asked. Worry filled Wendy's face. Just as she was about to say something, Hugh spoke out. I was worried that you'd run away. My dude, although you're bold and rash, I can't deny that you're really one of a kind. You're just a little foolish since you don't know when to give up, he said. The both of them were already not on good terms. Instead of giving in, Hugh chose to show off his position and abilities. Mr. Lewis, I have an idea. Penelope came forward with a murderous glare fixed upon Jasper and Wendy. She smiled cruelly. Why don't we raise the excitement? Besides the $35 million, why don't we add Wendy Schuler to the bet? Whoever wins the bet can take Wendy with him. Isn't this much more interesting? She proposed. Her words sparked an uproar among everyone. They all cast weird glances at Penelope. No wonder there was a saying that a woman's heart was the cruelest thing that there could be. The move Penelope made was cruel and shameless. She was forcing Jasper into a dead end. The greatest reward in the entire bet was not the $35 million anymore. It was Wendy Schuler. A bet like this was important to a man's dignity. If any one of them lost, they would rather kill themselves instead. Jasper frowned. He despised Penelope Hunt more than anything in the world. A flash of hatred could be seen in his gaze. Meanwhile, Hugh burst out into laughter. Penelope, you're smart. I admire you, he exclaimed. He continued to smile proudly. My dude, kneel down and crawl away if you don't dare to take on this bet, he told Jasper and Wendy. There was an icy glint in Wendy's gaze. She was thoroughly angered by Penelope Hunt. How could this woman be so devious and scheming? Although Jasper was not afraid of Hugh at all, he did not want Wendy to get involved in his affairs. Furthermore, using her as a bet was extremely insulting. Hugh and Penelope could be shameless all they want, but he treated Wendy as his friend. He would never insult her. Jasper, Wendy cut him off, looking at him intently. "Tell me, are you confident in winning?" she asked. Jasper laughed softly in response to this question. "I can easily defeat him," he said. "All right, carry on with the bet. Put me on the bet." As Wendy spoke, everyone could not help but be impressed by her courage. Not everyone would be willing to become a bet, let alone such a beautiful woman. Looking at Wendy's determined expression, Jasper nodded. "I won't let you down," he said. "I believe you," Wendy said, nodding her head firmly. Jasper turned over to look at Hugh after registering her words. "Mr. Lewis, since I've agreed to your request to add to the bet, you should add something too. I don't fancy the woman beside you. Raise your money to $50 million, he said calmly. His words made Hugh stare at him. The others did not expect Jasper to be so daring as well. Just when they thought that Hugh would never agree, he sneered out loud. "All right, I'll bet with you." Chapter 17. Hugh requested a checkbook immediately after speaking. He wrote out a check for $15 million and signed it. He then slammed it onto the table. "If you win, take everything. All this money will be yours. However, you need the skills to win first," he said. Wow, Mr. Lewis actually agreed to it. Everyone burst out into an uproar instantly. This bet was reaching up to $100 million. In 2000, even someone with just $1 million would be put up onto a pedestal and be known as a millionaire, let alone $100 million. Even to the high-status people present right now, a bet worth $100 million was shocking. Furthermore, the person joining the bet was Hugh Lewis. This made everything even more interesting. Looks of excitement appeared on everyone's faces. They all could not wait for the round to begin. Right then, the afternoon trading session began. The stocks were continuously fluctuating. The market changed every second. There was no way to guess what would happen in the next second. Jasper and Hugh stood in front of their respective computers and focused on their screens. Jasper was going through his memory in search of something. Not long after, he picked a company's stocks. Horizon Shares. When he opened the interface of Horizon Shares and looked at the downward trend of the stocks, Jasper grew confident. According to history, this stock first fell to the limit and rose all the way up to the limit. After that, nothing much changed. This was why Jasper did not choose it as one of his investment targets before this. It was the perfect timing to use this as a bet. The stocks of Horizon Shares had almost fallen to its limit. "I'll pick Horizon Shares. I bet that it'll rise to its limit," Jasper announced. The audience was composed of bosses within the financial industry. Naturally, they were all familiar with stocks and knew a lot about Horizon Shares. They instantly burst out into laughter upon hearing Jasper's choice. Is he joking right now? This stock has remained stagnant for 3 months. The dealer isn't renewing the market or suppressing it on purpose. This can only mean that the company isn't doing well and nobody wants to call dibs on it. If the market rises, it'll continue falling. You're telling me that a stock like that will rise to the limit? Alas, young people are young people. It's already about to fall to its limit. I guess he's closing his eyes and taking a gamble. Otherwise, how would he be able to win Mr. Lewis? He's doomed. He'll have to give up his date and his assets. Mr. Lewis is right. Young people nowadays are way too rash. They'll have to lose something one way or another. Exactly, look at Navy Pharmaceuticals, the stock Mr. Lewis picked. The company is doing extremely well, and its stocks are stable as well. One can tell that it'll rise at first sight. Meanwhile, look at the junk Jasper Lane chose. He's here to be a joker, right? Hugh glanced at Horizon Shares and chuckled. Don't say that, everyone. Maybe this kid can really estimate well. What if it really rises, he said. After Hugh finished speaking, Horizon Shares fell to its limit. Everyone erupted into laughter. Huh, you're being humorous, Mr. Lewis. How can he possibly estimate things well? This kid here picked a stock that has fallen to its limit. I'm dying of laughter. Exactly, it has already fallen to its limit. Is it possible for this trashy stock to rebound and come up with a counterattack? I've been trading stocks for so many years and I've never seen something like that happen. Jasper and Wendy were not affected in the slightest by the laughter encompassing them and the red sign on the screen that indicated the stock had fallen to its limit. Looking at Wendy's indifferent demeanor, Jasper admired her all the more. He was not afraid as he had memories from his past life. However, Wendy was doing all this based on her trust in him. How many people could do so? Don't be worried. Noticing Jasper's glance, Wendy thought that he had started panicking. She lowered her voice and whispered in his ear, "If worst comes to worst, I'll call my father. My father's very powerful. Nobody will dare to do anything." As Wendy's fragrant scent lingered around his nose, Jasper felt like laughing and crying at the same time. He almost forgot that Wendy was cheating on this bet. She had no intentions to follow the rules at all. Nothing could beat her invincible and powerful father. It's rising, it's rising. The stocks for Navy Pharmaceuticals are rising, someone exclaimed. Everyone turned over at once. The stock Hugh picked, Navy Pharmaceuticals, had risen up greatly. It continued to rise. It seemed like the victorious side had already been determined right then. Hugh chuckled. The stock you chose has already fallen to its limit. I guess there's no need to continue wasting everyone's time, right? Miss, you're now mine, he said. Wendy had an impassive expression on her face. She did not say a single thing. She simply stared at Jasper. If he nodded, she would call her father immediately and ask him to take control of the situation at hand. Right then, John Jackson exclaimed out loud in excitement, "It's rising! It's rising!" "What are you hollering for, John? Everyone can see that Navy Pharmaceuticals is on the rise. Do we need you to tell us?" F***CK. I'm talking about Horizon shares. The one Jasper Lane picked. F***CK. Look at this uptrend. It's rising way too strongly. Everyone, Hugh included, rushed over to look at Jasper's screen. Their hearts lurched immediately. Chapter 18. As depicted on the software program, Horizon shares had stopped falling and began rising on an upward trend, just like a dragon soaring up into the horizons. The stock for Horizon shares rose up rapidly and reached the limit straight away. Only a few minutes had passed since it fell to its limit. Hugh's eye twitched repeatedly as he stared at the upward trend line cutting through the entire screen. He could not believe it. This was not as simple as a stock rising up vehemently against all expectations. Within a few minutes' time, Hugh had lost $50 million in cash. $50 million in cash was enough for one to buy multiple real estate in a time like this. Oh my God! It has really risen to the limit. Hundreds of thousands of stocks have been directly sealed. Someone shouted out loud in shock. How can this be? I've never seen such a trend in my entire life. It happened without any indications beforehand. How can this be possible? Everyone's hearts lurched upon catching sight of the uptrend. After making sure that they were not seeing things, they looked at Jasper the way they would look at God, in admiration. He's the god of stocks. He's really the god of stocks. John exclaimed in admiration. He thought that Jasper's impassiveness was a result of him being way too shocked. However, Jasper still had a calm expression on his face. John understood now. He had been confident since the very start. What kind of man was he? Jasper leisurely picked up the ruby pendant and checked under everyone's stares. He now had $50 million. He waved at Hugh. The winner gets it all. Thank you for your gifts, Mr. Lewis. After speaking, Jasper pulled Wendy, who was still standing at the same spot, and proceeded to leave the room. Stand right there, Hugh roared out in anger. He gritted his teeth upon noticing that Jasper had not stopped walking. Nevertheless, he could not bring himself to say anything. There were so many people watching him here. If he went against his own words, he would be thoroughly screwed. He was a powerful man. However, there were many people who would love to see him dead. A few of his archenemies were here, right now. They would definitely not miss out on this opportunity. However, Hugh could not lose to Jasper just like that. Just as Hugh was racking his brain to think of something, Penelope grabbed his sleeve. Mr. Lewis, what just happened? How did he win? She asked anxiously. He slapped her in the face. Hugh glared at Penelope, who had fallen to the floor. It's all your fault, you stupid B****sh. Scram at once. Otherwise, I'll kill you, he yelled. A shocked expression appeared on Penelope's face. However, she was afraid as well. She did not dare to talk back to him and simply accepted his insults. How could Rickton White not notice that Hugh was infuriated? He immediately pulled Penelope away and left the venue with her. Everything had ended. The entire hall was silent. Nobody would have expected this round of gambling to end in such a way. Before Jasper made his lethal strike, nobody expected that he would win. Hugh, who was smug the entire round, ended up being the final loser. Everyone, John included, still had looks of shock and admiration toward Jasper in their gaze from the explosive moment just now. He took away $50 million just like that. Nonetheless, he won with his own skills. Why could he not take the money? Pondering upon this, John and the others started to take pleasure in Hugh's current situation. Many of them had taken a distaste to Hugh's bossiness and domineering stance. However, they had never dared to speak up against him. Now that he had lost $50 million, his company's future operations would become a big problem. He had fallen to his doom within such a short span of time. He has so much potential, someone murmured in a low voice. Before the others could rise up to express their agreement, Hugh pinned them with a gaze that was as fierce as that of a wounded lone wolf. You guys think that he won the bet? Hugh grinned maliciously. Chapter 19. Nobody wanted to trigger Hugh's fury when he had just lost everything. Everyone remained silent. I've been dominating the stock market for so many years. When I made my fortune, that kid was still playing in the dirt. If he thinks that he can defeat me through this alone, he should continue dreaming, Hugh yelled. He then turned around and left the venue. A slight frown formed on John's face. He was worried about Jasper. Alas, he was not wrong. He was an extremely powerful force in the stock market. Since he had made such a big loss, he would not just let it be. However, Jasper did not know about all this. He brought Wendy, who was still shocked from the previous surprising events, out of Royce Villa. How did you know for sure that the stocks for Horizon shares would rise? Wendy could not resist asking him. Jasper had not revealed any signs of hesitation and fear since the very beginning. He seemed to be confident in how the results would turn out. If Wendy did not know that it was impossible to predict the trend of stocks, she would have thought that Jasper had estimated everything perfectly. I believe in my instincts, Jasper said with a smile on his face. Nobody can tell if stocks will rise for sure. I often just go with my instincts. Wendy was rendered speechless. This reason was unbelievable, but it seemed to be the best explanation for everything that happened. Weren't you afraid that you'd lose such a large bet? Wendy asked. Jasper stared at her intently. I won't lose with you by my side, he replied. His words made Wendy press her lips into a firm line. At a loss of words, all she felt was her heart racing as it thumped loudly. What nonsense are you talking about? She murmured, avoiding his gaze instinctively. Although she was blaming him for spouting nonsense, her demeanor and the tone of her voice revealed how shy and flustered she was. Wendy, who looked like an ethereal goddess most of the time, had a human touch to her as well. Since things had gotten interrupted and Wendy did not want to continue asking about the bet earlier, the both of them took a ride back to town. After bidding Jasper goodbye, when he left, Jasper did not ask her to stay. Although she would definitely stay back to accompany him if he asked her, there was no need to do so. There were plenty of days ahead. Jasper still had plenty of time to foster a relationship with Wendy. The next day, Jasper went to Commercial Bank to deposit the $50 million he won from Hugh and transfer the amount into his futures account. He then returned home and did not leave the house after that. If he did not recall wrongly, today would be the day movement began in the international crude oil futures market. It all started because a fire broke out in one of the major oil-producing countries in the Middle East. It was originally a small fire in an oil field that could have been put out easily. However, an unexpected strong gust of wind caused the fire to detonate the three largest oil pipelines in the oil field. The entire world was then sent into a bout of frenzy. At the moment, the prices for crude oil were still hovering at the bottom. The current price was the lowest in recent years. Nevertheless, this incident caused crude oil prices to rise vehemently. Although the prices dropped after that, the prices for crude oil had never fallen again throughout the next years. After he planned out the course of actions he would be taking, Jasper opened the software. He had $62 million of funds in his account at the moment. Under a leverage of 50 times, he would have an operational principal of $3.1 billion. Although the money currently all belonged to the bank, he believed that the balance of his account would reach his desired amount. According to the exchange rate, this would be $360 million. Even with the experience of 2 lifetimes, Jasper felt rather anxious at the moment. This was $360 million in the year 2000. With this money, Jasper would become explosively wealthy and be able to receive countless benefits. Crude oil was now priced at $28 per barrel. The fire had yet to occur. Jasper did not hesitate anymore. He completed the deal at once and bought futures in his desired direction. He purchased thousands of barrels in one go. The order for 14,400 lots was immediately submitted for listing. $360 million entered the market. It was swallowed up by the international crude oil stock trading market within the blink of an eye. Jasper breathed out in relief upon seeing that the trade had been successfully completed. The next step would be to wait patiently. Chapter 20. In a luxurious villa within the province, Dawson Schuler raised his phone and laughed. "That means you really find this young man extremely capable," he said. Wendy, who was seated in her office in Commercial Bank, replied intently, "For real, Dad. He's the most capable person I've ever met in the financial industry. I know that the company is now in a financial slump. That's why I intend to bring him to meet you," she said. "Aren't you bringing your boyfriend to meet me instead?" Dawson laughed out loud. A faint blush dusted Wendy's cheeks. "Dad, I'm telling you something important," she nagged. All right, Dawson replied. "Since he's your friend, it's all right if you bring him home for a meal. I have my own plans for other things. You shouldn't overthink things. I've been through so many hardships throughout the years. This isn't much of a problem. It can be solved quickly," he added. From Dawson's perspective, Wendy was still young. Her friend was also a young man. What experience and capability would he have? Wendy was finding any help she could get. Little did she know, he was facing a huge problem. One could not even begin to imagine the magnitude of it. He could not solve it himself, so how could her friend do so? "You'll definitely change your mind after meeting him," Wendy said. She understood Dawson's thoughts. However, she did not say anything else. Reality spoke louder than words. She believed that someone like Jasper would shine wherever he went. After hanging up the call, Dawson sighed. If this problem could not be solved, he was glad that his daughter had someone to take care of her. However, this young man would first have to go through his vetting. On the other hand, Wendy was just about to head over to tell Jasper the time they would be meeting her father. Right then, someone barged into her office in a hurry. Harold Wood had an extremely panicked expression on his face. "Oh my goodness, Miss Schuler. Did you know that Jasper Lane purchased the futures for international crude oil in a full position? He leveraged the prices by 50 times. It's $3.6 billion. He bought it all in a full position," he exclaimed. "Huh? Has he gone insane?" When he shouted out loud in surprise. He was entering the market in a full position under a futures leverage. This meant that if the market fluctuated slightly in the opposite direction, Jasper's position would be liquidated and he would be done for. "I'll go look for him at once," Wendy exclaimed. Pushing Harold away, she rushed out immediately. At this moment, a fire was slowly spreading at one of the largest oil fields in the Middle East. A strong wind was headed its way from more than 6 miles away. It would be arriving in a few minutes' time. Nobody realized what impact this fire and the incoming gust of wind would bring to the world. It would take some time for the incident to take place. Jasper waited patiently for the news. Instead of news about the fire breaking out, Wendy was the one who came to him instead. "Wendy, why are you panting?" Jasper asked curiously when he caught sight of Wendy, who was holding onto the doorframe while heaving loudly. "How are you still so calm?" Wendy accepted the cup of water Jasper handed to her. She took a big gulp of water without thinking twice. "Did you purchase the international crude oil futures with a full position?" she questioned him. "Yes, you received news quite quickly," Jasper replied with a smile. He did not deny it. "Of course, your transaction involves a colossal amount of money. Commercial Bank will definitely keep an eye on it. Apart from me, the province branch will definitely be alerted about it as well. Why are you being so bold?" It's too risky to do so. What if? Wendy babbled on anxiously. However, she could not continue going on after mentioning what if. Of course, she was on Jasper's side. She wanted him to earn as much money as possible, so she did not want to say anything inauspicious. What if I lose everything? Jasper asked. He did not beat around the bush. To him, everything had already happened in history. He was now simply watching everything unfold from a first-person view. Can you still cancel the deal right now? Wendy asked hopefully. I can't cancel it, Jasper said. He shook his head and extended his arm out to Wendy. What do you want? Wendy asked Jasper while staring at his extended arm. Return my glass to me. I was drinking water from it halfway. Jasper replied with a tone of exasperation. Huh? Wendy gasped. She instantly blushed. Not only was this Jasper's glass, but he had also drunk from it. Was this an indirect kiss? Did that mean that she had just lost her first kiss? Wendy was so shy that she wanted to turn around and run away at once. However, Jasper pulled her into his newly remodeled study room right then. The furnishing is rather simple, but I'm sure I'll be able to move to another house soon. Take a seat, Jasper said as he sat down in front of his computer. Wendy took a look at her surroundings. It was so simple and plain that it did not look like a billionaire's study room at all. There was only a table with a computer on it and 2 chairs. There was not even a bookshelf in the room. However, now was not the time to look at all these. Wendy took a chair and sat behind Jasper. Since there was no taking back what had already happened, she could only pray to God that Jasper would earn something in return. You really are my lucky star, Jasper suddenly said. He sounded pretty excited. What do you mean? Wendy asked doubtfully. Jasper turned the screen over to Wendy. Look, he said. Wendy looked over and saw the news on the computer screen. A fire had broken out in the largest oil field in the Middle East, which was also the world's second largest oil field. The fire was still burning strongly, and a high-level country official reported that the production capacity may not be able to be restored within the year. The oil field may thus close down. The short news sent Wendy into a state of stupor. Trading in any market was essentially a manifestation of the supply-demand relationship. Now that the world's second-largest oil field may be closing down due to a fire, there would inevitably be a sharp decline in the global crude oil production capacity. How would the prices of crude oil circulating the market be affected? Then, even a 3-year-old kid would know that the prices would rise frantically. That was the world's second-largest oil field. It contributed up to 1/10 of global crude oil production. If Wendy did not know that it was impossible, she would have thought that Jasper was the one who started the fire. Jasper did not have the time to talk to her right now. He immediately switched to the interface showing the futures. As expected, the market had responded at once. Futures were not stocks. They could not rise or fall to a certain limit. Instead, they could rise or fall unlimitedly. The prices had already risen from $28 to $31 within a few minutes. Looking at the trend, this was just the beginning. How much have you earned? Wendy asked in disbelief. Let me take a look. $43 million. Chapter 21. Hearing these words, even Wendy Schuler, who was used to seeing wealth, felt suffocated. Oh my, Wendy murmured, with this rapid increase in wealth. Why do I feel like I'm dreaming? This is just the beginning. The corner of Jasper's mouth curled up. In his memory of the next 10 years to come, this wave of crude oil prices was the most likely opportunity for him to get rich overnight. It would be gone if he missed it. There would be many other opportunities to make money, but there would not be another chance for him to make so much so fast. Many of his plans in the future relied on this opportunity to work out. Speaking of which, he had to thank Hugh Lewis for the $50 million. Otherwise, Jasper could still earn some money, but not nearly as much. The continuous uptick of news immediately hit the international market like a tornado, and everyone's panic was directly reflected in the futures market. The prices skyrocketing in a short period of time blinded countless people. Just when people thought that the newly emerged price was the highest point, the number refreshed in the next second would hit them in the face. Everyone was screaming frantically, but few people dared to enter the venture at this moment because they were afraid that the roller coaster ride would fall rapidly in the next second. International capital surged rapidly as countless financial predators rushed into the market like sharks that smelled blood. As a result, a rare situation appeared in the history of the entire international crude oil futures market. There was only a buy order, no sell order. All the contracts in the market were snatched up and sold out. There were no transactions in the active market. People who only reacted now and wanted to re-enter the market were left without a chance. No matter the money, no fool would ever sell the crude oil in their hands. This was a goose that could really lay golden eggs. In this event, the biggest players were naturally those national units that controlled the world, followed by those financial oligarchs and consortia. Retail investors like Jasper were one of a kind and should be very conspicuous. It was just that no one would ever find out that such a young man had quietly laid a brick at the lowest point. As a strategic investment, crude oil was of great practical significance. Every country was frantically competing for the remaining crude oil on the market. For the countries, money was not an issue. They were more concerned about its strategic significance. Thus, under such circumstances of extremely strong demand, the price of crude oil futures climbed to a terrifying price of $58. The current domestic time was 2 a.m. Due to the time difference, the futures market was the morning of the third day. Even after staring at the screen for 7 to 8 hours, neither Jasper nor Wendy felt tired. Instead, they were even more excited than ever. Wendy, who had been persuading him to give up the venture before, was now more excited than anyone else. Go up! Go up! Keep going up! It's up by $0.1 again. Huh? Looking at Wendy's demeanor, it seemed like she was happier than making money on her own. However, Jasper was much calmer as he sipped from a teacup. Usually, he did not smoke or drink alcohol, preferring to drink tea instead. It was because he felt that tobacco and alcohol would numb people's minds. Finally, when the price of crude oil reached $59, Jasper chose to sell all the crude oil in hand. Chapter 22. The highest price of crude oil in history was $59. Following this, as the strongest powerhouse announced the release of some crude oil inventories, the price of crude oil would begin to ebb. So this was the perfect timing to withdraw while the going was good. When the market was most active and Jasper's large volume order of 11,400 was listed, it immediately caused a reaction from the market. It was wiped out almost instantly, and the outside world began to speculate which institution was holding so much crude oil in its hands. There were no secrets in the capital market. Soon, news of this large order from a retail investor came out, which immediately caused a sensation in the global financial community. Everyone wanted to find out about this mysterious retail investor. At this time, however, Jasper and Wendy were huddled together in the small study room, staring at the dazzling string of numbers in his account. After deducting costs and commissions, we made a profit of more than $3 billion. The account balance is $3,101,240,000. Wendy stared at Jasper blankly, her pretty face flushed with excitement. She suppressed her rapidly beating heart and said in an incredulous tone, You're too amazing. You actually used 60 million to make billions. Jasper let out a breath, the corners of his mouth turning upward as he said, If there are no issues, the man in front of you should now be one of the 10 richest people in the country. In the year 2000, the 7th in the National Forbes richest list was someone in this country with a total net worth of $350 million. At this moment, Jasper's assets had reached $360 million. He was well deserving of 7th place indeed. Of course, there were too many hidden wealthy people in this country, and Jasper was not arrogant enough to think that his $3.1 billion was enough to rank him 7th in the country. However, on the bright side, it was a fact that no one could deny. In 8 hours, Jasper realized his dream, doubling his personal assets 50 times over from $62 million to $3.1 billion. He withdrew the money successfully. This was a miracle that had never been seen in the history of mankind. Those with higher multipliers than him were not as rich as him, and those richer had fewer multipliers. All this happened in a remote corner of this ordinary county. When everything was settled and the money was in his pocket, Jasper exhaled in relief when he received the text message from the bank. The remittance of such a huge amount of funds would cause a reaction from Commercial Bank as soon as he went to work tomorrow. Moreover, Jasper estimated that his big move would also attract the attention of many people in the international market, but he had no idea how big the storm could be. After being ultra-focused for 7 to 8 hours, even the young and energetic Jasper felt a little overwhelmed by now. At this moment, two stomachs grumbling sounded at the same time. Both Jasper and Wendy looked at each other, a little embarrassed. When people were too nervous or emotional, they would ignore the needs of the body. However, once relaxed, the hunger would follow immediately. "Let's go out for supper," Jasper said with a smile. It was too late now, and the two of them were living in an ordinary small county that was far less boisterous than a big city. So when they got to the streets, the only thing they could find at this time was a snack bar that was about to close. Had it not been for Wendy's beauty, the lady boss would not have accepted their business. Sitting in the simple snack bar, Wendy was obviously curious, as it was her first time eating in a snack bar. "Are you unhappy with me for taking you out for supper in a place like this?" Jasper took a set of utensils and smiled when he passed it to Wendy. Wendy blinked and joked, saying, "You've earned so much. Of course, you have to treat me to a good meal. This meal doesn't count. Anything you wish for. As long as it's for sale, you can request it," Jasper said generously. As long as it was something that money could buy, it would not be a problem for him now. Chapter 23. The lady boss served a plate of snacks. Listening to the couple's conversation, she smiled and said, "You young couple seem to have a really good relationship. Little lady, did your boyfriend make money today? Don't just ask him to buy you dinner. He has to buy you some clothes too." In the eyes of the snack bar owner, Jasper had made hundreds or thousands at best. She would never have imagined that the man sitting in her shop and eating a fried nugget had just earned $3.1 billion. Wendy chuckled. "Did you hear that?" "I heard that. Buy everything." Jasper picked up a fried nugget and brought it to Wendy's mouth. "Hurry up and eat. You must be starving." Seeing the fried nugget in front of her mouth, Wendy was stunned for a while, wondering if she should open her mouth and eat it. Before this, when the lady boss mentioned their relationship, Wendy did not care. Rather, she did not want to care. Now, however, Jasper's behavior made her a little bit shy. Jasper also noticed that his actions were a little improper. Just when he was looking for an excuse, Wendy opened her mouth and gently bit into the fried nugget. While chewing slowly, Wendy dared not look at Jasper at all. She lowered her head as if savoring the taste of this treat. Seeing the bashful and charming girl in front of him, while also considerate and fearful that she could not recover from her embarrassment, Jasper chuckled lightly. Triumph in both business and love life. Since his life had ended up like this, what else could he ask for? After supper, Jasper and Wendy chatted as they walked toward her house in the county. As the daughter of the richest man in the province, of course, Dawson would not let Wendy suffer. Although he agreed to let her conceal her identity at work, he also bought a large house in the best community in the county for her. It was usually occupied by Wendy alone. At the door of the house, Wendy said with some regret, "I'm home. Why was it so fast?" The girl was a little annoyed. The distance should be quite far. "I'll be going back then," Jasper said. Today, the relationship between the two had advanced a step, but before any affirmation, Jasper naturally would not do anything improper. Nodding her head, Wendy suddenly thought of something and said, "By the way, are you free in a few days? Come with me to the provincial capital." Jasper immediately understood that he was about to visit Dawson Schuler, the future father-in-law. He nodded and said, "Okay. Aren't you going to ask me what we'll be doing in the provincial capitals?" Jasper's decisiveness made Wendy a little confused. "It can't be to see the future in-laws, right?" Jasper told the truth half-jokingly. Wendy was so embarrassed that she stomped her feet and said, "How clever of you!" After speaking, she slipped back into the house as if she wanted to escape and slammed the door shut. Jasper recalled Wendy's beautiful yet shy and embarrassed appearance as he left with a smile. In the house, Wendy leaned back against the door and heard the sound of footsteps going away. She was feeling a little lost and nervous. Holding her hot cheeks, she murmured, "This person, how can he be so smart and so bad?" That night, Jasper slept peacefully, but the international capital market exploded. Less than half an hour after Jasper cleared his account, the world's largest powerhouse held a press conference to announce the release of domestic crude oil inventories to ease the soaring pressure on crude oil prices. Immediately following that, all the smaller forces behind the powerhouse also declared the same. As soon as the announcement came out, the price of crude oil futures fell. Although the price was still outrageously high, it was not as crazy as before. The market had recovered from the previous frenzy, so people immediately noticed the mysterious retail investor who had thrown a large order of 14,400 lots at the highest price point. This retail investor, could it be a decoy account of a powerhouse? The financial predators scratched their heads. Otherwise, how could they explain his sudden actions that were immediately followed by the announcement that resulted in the price drop? Buying at the lowest point and selling at the highest point was ideal trading rules that every novice would know. However, how many people could actually do it? This retail investor did it, though. Therefore, this mysterious retail investor was even more unfathomable. Slowly, the news about the mysterious financial genius who swept up hundreds of millions of dollars overnight spread wildly. Some media even claimed that this mysterious retail investor was the second. Buffett and his talent in the financial field was incomparable. The sun rose again, and John Jackson came to his president's office. He made a pot of tea comfortably. While waiting for the computer to turn on, he drank his tea happily while thinking about today's schedule. Suddenly, the office door was pushed open. The loud bang caused John's hand to tremble with fright, and hot tea poured over him. John jumped up and shouted at Harold Wood, who rushed into the office. "****, you scared me. Are you asking to be fired?" Harold wiped the sweat from his forehead and said with a peculiar expression, "President, something has happened." John was taken aback. Frowning, he said, "What's the big deal for you to be so flustered?" Swallowing a mouthful of spit, Harold could not restrain his excitement. He said in a very complicated tone, "President, you weren't in the office yesterday, so you don't know about this yet. That big client, Jasper Lane, entered the crude oil futures market with a full position." John was stunned for a moment. Ignoring the tea stains on his body, he said in surprise, "Full position? Is he crazy? Did he lose all his money?" Before Harold could say anything, John frowned and continued, "This kid is overconfident and doesn't follow the rules and regulations. Sure enough, he's in deep trouble now. Entering the market at 50 times the leverage, and he still took on a full position with such a big risk. It's over for him." "President, it's not like that." Harold looked at John and said with a wry smile, "In the wee hours of this morning, $3.1 billion was credited into his account. Because of this transaction, our entire county branch's annual deposit KPI has reached the target. We even set a new record. I watched the news on the way to work. On the international front, it's rumored that a mysterious retail investor made hundreds of millions of dollars in yesterday's crude oil futures market. This person is the biggest winner of the crude oil market this time. It's in line with the time when Jasper entered the market and the amount of settlement. I'm guessing that the person being discussed in the entire international financial market is him. President, that's $3.1 billion we're talking about. With a capital of $62 million, he made $3.1 billion in just one day." Hearing Harold's words, John froze in place as if he had been petrified. Before he could digest the news, the red phone on the desk rang shrilly. Looking at this red phone that was used for emergency, John swallowed and murmured, "A call from the president's office of the provincial branch. This bragging right is over the roof." This kid actually pushed John Jackson's name into the eyes of the president of the provincial branch. Chapter 24. Send out my instructions. Keep Jasper Lane's personal information strictly confidential. No one is allowed to disclose it. John ordered. He knew very well about Jasper's current status and position. It would not be a good thing if such a large customer was taken away. Furthermore, any leaked information would cause unnecessary trouble for Jasper as well. "Yes." Harold nodded, understanding what the president meant. He immediately went to carry out the order. In the year 2000, at this specific time frame, the business models of most domestic industries were still at a very basic stage. In this era, when stock trading was still new, Making billions of dollars in profits from the futures market overnight was simply a myth. Jasper knew that he could not hold back the news about him making money in the crude oil futures market, and that it would cause a sensation, but he did not expect this matter to cause pandemonium. Online portals and physical newspapers immediately published the news that a mysterious retail investor swept $3.1 billion in the international crude oil futures market overnight. The news exploded in the faces of countless citizens, especially because this mysterious retail investor was a domestic citizen. Everyone's jaws dropped at this fact. $3.1 billion. This was a number that made people feel dizzy even when they said it. At the start of this millennium, when someone with an annual income of more than $100,000 was considered to be a rich person, ordinary folks dared not think of such a large number even in their dreams. Although all forces were trying their best to find out about this person, as a business that aimed to be the first in the universe, Commercial Bank had solid moral integrity. The news was kept under lock and no information about Jasper was leaked. At present, the news and reports only garnered a quick glance from Jasper. He did not pay much attention to them. The excitement was over. Right now, Jasper needed to seize every opportunity to make money and use it to arm and strengthen himself. After all, this country was filled with hidden talents and undisclosed prodigies. In front of the real bosses, his capital was insufficient. Now he was still at the fundamental development stage. He was more concerned about the two behemoths worth trillions coming up in the future. The first was the company that really changed people's lifestyles. This company had only been established for less than a year, and Ma Yun was still leading his 18 associates to set up his 1688 website in an apartment. There were still 3 years to go before the establishment of that super website, Taobao. Although Tencent, another online social giant, had launched QQ and occupied the first position of domestic social software, suffering from the inability to adapt to change, it was still facing difficulties with server fees. These two companies were definite targets for Jasper to invest in the future, but the time had not arrived as they were not facing hardships yet. If he entered the market at this point, the successful businesses may not give up too many shares. Therefore, he needed to bide his time. These two companies had a bright future, but before they started to make profits, they would experience several crises and go on the verge of bankruptcy. That would be the time when Jasper made his appearance. According to Jasper's memory, Alibaba's difficulties were still a few months away, but Tencent was almost at the brink right now. Within a month, that would be the best timing. At this time, Jasper, who was nestling at home, recorded all these things and began to plan how to get Tencent into his pocket. Just after finishing the plan, Jasper's cell phone rang. It was Wendy. Chapter 25. Jasp, you asked me to help you pay attention to the news about the house a few days ago. I heard something today. There's a villa area in the city. It has been more than half a year since its opening, but the sales are very bleak. The developers can't support it anymore, so they're doing promotional activities. The villa area in the city? Is it called Thornton Park? Jasper asked suddenly. How do you know? Wendy asked in surprise. Of course, Jasper knew about it. In his previous life, the boss of the company he worked for was the owner of Thornton Park. Thornton Park was indeed a villa area launched by local real estate developers in early 2000. It was mainly targeted at successful entrepreneurs and business owners, but the positioning was too high-end and advanced. As a result, the number of units sold in the 2 years after the opening did not even exceed 20%. Later, the developer went bankrupt and the project was taken over by others. It did not take long for the reversal of fortune. Real estate prices across the country ushered in the first wave of the surge. And Thornton Park, which no one cared about or wanted even if it was given practically for free, became the most expensive residence in the city. Before Jasper was reborn, although the units here were more than 20 years old, they were still not out of date. Real estate prices soared to a terrifying $267,000 per square feet, and a villa was worth more than $50 million. What about the housing prices in Thornton Park now? $800,000 was enough to buy a unit, furnishings included. It was no different than picking up scraps. I've heard it before. After all, it's the #1 residence in the city, Jasper said with a smile. He made an appointment with Wendy and headed straight out. Sitting in Wendy's BMW, Jasper felt that buying a car had to be put on the agenda. No matter what, Jasper Lane was already a wealthy billionaire now. How could he still ride in a chick's car every day? Thinking of cars, Jasper recalled BYD that had a great development in the future. Although not the best traditional fuel car, the new electric car was really awesome. In this regard, it seemed that it could be deployed in advance. In this era, there were opportunities to make money everywhere. Jasper was a little worried about not having enough funds on hand. The amount of $3.1 billion was enough to scare ordinary people to death. But in Jasper's blueprint, every targeted investment would touch hundreds of billions in the future. Chatting with Wendy all the way, the two went directly to the sales department of Thornton Park in the bustling area of the city. Although promotional banners were hung at the door, it was not surprising that this place was very empty. For later generations, $800,000 for a villa unit was the same as picking scraps, but in an era when the per capita annual income was less than $10,000, few people could afford it. Entering the sales department, there was not even a person to greet him. Jasper looked up and saw all the sales ladies wandering around with a couple. The woman was dressed up glamorously, and it could be seen that her features were rather pretty. However, she exuded a coquettish attitude, and her posture was pretentious. The person next to her was a middle-aged man in a suit and LV belt buckle, looking like a successful boss. However, Jasper and Wendy were very young. They were obviously unlikely to be able to afford a unit here. In contrast, the discerning people felt that the success rate on the other side would be higher. Jasper and Wendy were unperturbed, looking at the mock-up model by themselves. At this moment, however, the woman who was acting coy not far away caught a glimpse of Wendy. She froze for a moment before a sneer immediately appeared on her face. Wendy Schuler? Not far away, Wendy looked back as the familiar figure caught her eyes. Janice Little? Chapter 26. I didn't expect to meet you at this place, Wendy. Janice yanked the man beside her and came over to Wendy. She glanced at Jasper beside her and said disdainfully, Wendy, you do have a special preference. Is he your boyfriend? Dear, who is this lady? The man beside Janice looked at Wendy, immediately attracted by her gorgeous looks and vibe. If it was not for Janice's presence, he would have gone forth to court her. She was the goddess of our university, but after so many years, she's still the same way, always putting on an act as if she's very elegant. Janice hooked her arms around the man's arm and looked at Wendy proudly. During their times at university, they were both goddesses of the university. However, regardless of looks or the vibes they gave off, Janice would always lose to Wendy. That led to her having a miserable life in university. Janice always bore the grudge. She did not expect to bump into her at this place. Besides, Wendy was with a very old-fashioned man. Surely Janice would not miss this opportunity to tease her. Wendy, are you here to buy or just a window shop? The price listed here isn't that cheap. Don't think you'll be able to get a cheaper price just because the entrance states there's a promotion. You'll need at least $800,000 just for the cheapest unit. I can see that the man beside you isn't even wearing any branded clothing. Can he afford it? Her comments were ear-piercing. Suddenly, everyone's gaze shifted over to them. Wendy's expression was indifferent as she looked at Janice with a cold gaze. Then, she said to Jasper, maybe we'll come back later. Wendy was not willing to cause any trouble. Jasper was not willing to witness her being bullied and gave her a gaze of comfort. Then, without bothering Janice, he immediately shouted, Where's the saleswoman? I'm buying a unit. Tisk. Janice let out a sneer and looked at Jasper scornfully, saying, Where did this fool come from? Talking about purchasing houses the moment he starts talking? Do you think you can afford to buy the houses here? I'm very aware of the thinking you men have. You shouldn't put on an act and do irrational things in front of a pretty girl. You should do things that suit your status. Judging from your outfit that's not even branded, you still dare to purchase a house. Wendy whispered to Jasper when she heard Janice's endless sneering. Jasp, she's my course mate from university, but I've never offended her. Even so, she's always hostile toward me. She never treats me well. Why don't we come again at another time? Jasper understood her statement immediately. The lady with the name Janice had a nice appearance, but with just one glance at her, he knew she was a playgirl. A woman like her would only have her looks as her weapon. On the other hand, Wendy could easily win her, so it was pretty normal for Janice to develop a sense of jealousy against her. After giving Wendy a look of comfort, Jasper said calmly, "So you think one can only be rich if they're wearing branded clothing? Then your mindset is quite shallow." "Ah!" Janice burst into laughter. "Just admit that you're poor. Why bother smooth talking? You can't even afford to buy valuable clothing. Why bother talking sense to me? I've bumped into lots of poor guys like you who have no abilities but still enjoy talking big." While Janice was laughing coldly, the man beside her let out a cough. Then he said with squinted eyes, "Nice to meet you, miss. I'm Dixon Newton. I own a lighting shop. According to this year's record, its value would be tens of millions. Say, why don't we be friends?" Wendy was disgusted when she saw the revolting middle-aged man before her. She turned around to face Jasper, not even wanting to talk to him. This made Dixon ashamed. Suddenly, he had an awful expression on his face and snorted. She said to the saleswoman beside him, "Initially, I thought of purchasing a villa unit from you all for my darling to stay in. But these two people have made me frustrated. Can you please chase them out? But this pretty lady can stay back." The saleswomen exchanged terrified looks and felt troubled. Chapter 27. Dixon looked at Wendy with a perverted look, and this made Janice feel hateful that she started gritting her teeth. She quickly got herself involved and held on to Dixon's arm, saying, "You naughty. I'm right here, and you're flirting with another woman." Dixon burst into laughter. He raised his palm and slapped Janice's, but saying, "Don't worry. The one I love most is definitely you." As he was saying, Dixon glanced at Jasper coldly before snorting. "Hey, scumbag. Didn't you hear me asking you to leave? Why are you still standing here? And you bunch of saleswomen, are you all deaf? Or do you all think that this scumbag can afford to buy a house here? Let me tell you all, if you guys don't chase him out, I'm not going to buy." Dixon's comment made one of the saleswomen, who was slightly older and seemed to be the leader, grit her teeth. "Sir, as you've seen, we're currently quite busy. We can't entertain you, so please leave." Her comment had portrayed their attitude. Dixon and Janice smiled proudly. Janice covered her mouth and smiled while saying, "Hey, he's really bringing shame to his family for being chased out by others. When do you get it now, right? Ladies should look for a powerful man to rely on. What can a poor guy possibly give you? He'll only make you get chased out the place like a dog." Janice smiled coldly as she said evilly, "Since university, you like to act all prestigious. Whenever I see your behavior, it just makes me want to puke. What are you trying to show off to? In fact, you might be way hornier than I think. Shut your terrible mouth." A sudden roar made Janice fumble out of terror. She spun around and noticed that it was Jasper. Janice suddenly shouted with a stern voice, "Who are you to be roaring at me? Do you believe I'll cause you lots of trouble? I dare you. Let's see whether it'll be me who's going to cause you trouble first or the other way around." Jasper's eyes were glittering coldly. This woman was obviously challenging his limits by humiliating Wendy right in front of him. "Hey, brat, you're quite arrogant." Dixon smiled coldly and said in an unpleasant tone. Coincidentally, at this critical moment, two men came out from the office of the sales department. "President Jackson, we'll have to trouble you with our company's loan. Please take good care of it, or else our company will not be able to continue." The manager of the real estate company said to John respectfully and was trying to be on good terms with him. John remained composed and said politely, "Don't worry too much, Manager Jones. I know your company's ability well. However, I'm not the one to decide on the loan. It still requires investigation, so, hey, Mr. Lane, you're here as well?" John blurted the last comment after he saw Jasper at the entrance. Initially, John would only greet Jasper casually, but after finding out about the great events Jasper was involved with last night, John could no longer greet him casually. After all, he was facing the man who now had a net worth of $3.1 billion and was one of the country's top 10 super-rich men. They saw John calling out to Jasper and coming over with a delightful expression. John even bent slightly with a respectful behavior. Manager Jones was dumbfounded. The saleswomen were dumbfounded. Janice and Dixon were dumbfounded as well. Only Wendy put on a cold expression and stared at the group of people with a pitiful look in her eyes. Chapter 28. Dixon knew about John Jackson. After all, His company's loan was under commercial bank. There were a few occasions when he wanted to get to know this powerful president, but John never spared him any dignity. He did not even have a chance to enter his office. However, currently looking at John's action of trying to get on the other party's good terms made the corners of Dixon's mouth twitch. He found that behavior and expression rather familiar. That was the lowly expression he made when facing John. Mr. Jackson. Jasper was astonished as well to meet John here and shook his hand with a smile. Mr. Lane, you're here to buy houses? John asked. Jasper nodded and looked at the crowd, saying in a way that seemed calm, "That's right. Initially, I thought of having a look at the houses, and if there's a suitable one, I'd buy. But the service here has let me down. Just because of two people, they want to chase me out. So, here I am about to leave this place." His comment may have sounded calm, but in fact, there was a dark side to it. The manager of the real estate company had nearly gotten down on his knees and acknowledged John as his father just to get the loan. As for Dixon, he did not even have the chance to get to know John. Meanwhile, John was acting respectfully and cautiously before Jasper. From this obvious scenario, it was evident who was more superior. Manager Jones of the real estate company was a reasonable man. Seeing that John was about to get infuriated, he immediately dropped to his knees before Jasper with his heart pumping hard. He bent down and bowed in apology. Every gesture was accomplished in a split second. "Mr. Lane, it's really our fault for not providing proper hospitality. I'll fire all these saleswomen. Besides, from now onward, I'll personally provide my service to you. I'll give you the best discount and promotion to show you our sincere apology." He's a splendid person. Jasper looked at him with a smile, but obviously, Manager Jones misunderstood him. After thinking a while, he turned around and roared at Dixon and Janice. "The sales department is serving an honorable client. We'll be closed for the time being. You two, please make a move." Yeah, he's indeed a brilliant person. This time, even when he thought so as well. Dixon and Janice finally experienced what utter awkwardness felt like. The tables were flipped following Jasper's comment. Earlier, they were the ones ordering others to chase Jasper and Wendy out, but currently, they became an eyesore that was being chased out of the scene. Dixon's face went scarlet. His head was drenched with sweat as he wondered whether he should stay or not. As for Janice, she was so terrified that her face went pale. She dared not speak a word and only stared at Jasper, finding it hard to believe. With the intelligence she had, she would never comprehend what Jasper had that would make John want to get on his good terms. With just a word, he could revert the situation to favor him. This brat isn't just a poor guy. Could it be that all these people are blind? Manager Jones got angry when he saw the two people refusing to leave. He did not know about Jasper's identity. However, he knew that those who could make John behave so politely and respectfully were those he could not afford to offend. Maybe he's a second-generation son from a big family who has come out on his own to try and have an ordinary life. Aside from other issues earlier, if he had reacted any slower, John would have started questioning him. At that time, not just his loan would be in trouble, but whether he could continue being a manager would be questionable too. He was able to figure out the main problem with just only a tiny detail. That was the reason Jasper thought that Manager Jones was a splendid person. Just when Manager Jones was about to call the security guards to chase them out, Jasper spoke. "Forget it. If they're willing to stand here, then so be it. You're here to run your business. After all, each of you will just have to carry out your respective task." After speaking, Jasper brought Wendy aside and sat on the sofa in the client room. John and Manager Jones immediately followed them. The bunch of saleswomen who were getting fired had pitiful looks on their faces. They all glared at both Dixon and Janice. They would never serve them. Despite not being chased out anymore, both Dixon and Janice felt even more suffering. "That poor brat is obviously trying to make us look bad." Janice was so mad that she gritted her teeth. "Dixon, let's go back first. Later, we'll think of a way to get our revenge." Janice was a fool, but Dixon was not. Even though standing there was more humiliating than walking away, he knew that he should not leave just yet. Chapter 29. Dixon glared at Janice, who was the cause of the entire havoc, and said coldly, "You'd better shut your crap. If he plans to deal with me later on, I'll be in trouble." For now, we'll watch right here. Besides, I'll be able to prepare myself if I know how powerful he is." Dixon, who just blurted the comment, heard Jasper saying his first words from the sofa of the nearby client room. "The houses look not bad, and the price is cheap. I'm planning to buy all of it." Those few simple words echoed like thunderbolts in the quiet sales department. Everyone, including John, wore an astonished expression while looking at Jasper. People who always put on an act were those who liked to show off, but this time, Jasper did not plan to put on an act. These houses had the potential of rising in market value by 10 times in the future. Whoever purchased one would earn from it. He would not miss this opportunity, as just one villa less would mean losing tens of millions of profit. However, it was always because of that reason that Jasper was like a fool who attracted everyone's attention. Seeing the flustered looks on Manager Jones and John's face, Jasper knew that his comment might have frightened everyone. He said with a smile, "I'm sincerely planning to buy them all." "Manager Jones, you won't think that I'm cracking a joke, right? F***CKU. This is rubbish. One villa costs $800,000, and even though it's almost close to its cost price, you're now claiming that you want to buy all of them? Isn't this a joke? This is a villa. One of them costs $800,000. These aren't those vegetables selling at 80 cents by the roadside. Vegetables that you don't eat can still be used to feed the pigs. But why on earth would you purchase so many villas? To be the landlord?" Manager Jones was cursing frantically internally. Of course, he would not know that Jasper really planned on becoming a landlord. He would own one while his parents would stay in another one. In the future, he would spare a few units to build offices, make them into hostels, and even use them as temporary offices. As for the remaining, he would rent all of it. When the prices rose, he would build a big office building and sell it off. That would allow him to earn a ton from it. "Well, Mr. Lane, all this while we've never done such a huge transaction on our houses. For now, there are still 24 units of villas that are empty. This is quite a huge number," Manager Jones said cautiously. Every word he said was done after thorough consideration, fearing he might offend Jasper. However, what he was trying to convey was pretty obvious. There were 24 units of villas that were empty, and purchasing all of them would be impossible. Jasper frowned. Just when everyone let out a sigh of relief, he said another shocking comment. "Only 24 units? It's quite little, but it's better than none." Jasper thought that there would be at least 30 units, but he did not expect there to only be 24 units left. However, he did not mind. At most, he would only end up earning less. At that moment, John could make out that Jasper was not joking and really intended to purchase all the villas. Of course, he was aware that Jasper had the ability to do so. Currently, Jasper's account had 3.1 billion cash in it. Buying all these houses would not be a difficult thing for him. "Mr. Jones, my friend has already spoken, and he's really going to buy them. The loan on the houses of your real estate company is about to reach its limit. Now, with such huge business in front of you, why don't you hurry up and propose a better price?" John reminded him from the side. Since John had spoken up, there would be no more reason for Manager Jones to hesitate. Regardless of Jasper's intention in purchasing those houses, as long as he could earn back his cash, he would not be bothered by anything else. "I can give Mr. Lane another 10% discount from the $800,000 price. This will be its cost value," Manager Jones said through his gritted teeth. As soon as he finished speaking, a card was thrown on the coffee table between the two men. "Sign the contract," said Jasper simply. Manager Jones was dumbfounded once again. He really takes buying villas as if he's buying vegetables? Chapter 30. Just a sentence or two, and the deal's sealed? Manager Jones was dumbfounded. After snapping out, he was feeling thrilled. After the end of drafting the agreement, both parties signed and chopped. It was acknowledged. Then, Jasper immediately transferred the $17.28 million into the company's account. This made Manager Jones so touched that he could feel the heat in his eyes from the tears. His company's financial flow had been about to break. If he had failed to get a loan or failed to sell any houses, the company would need to officially announce bankruptcy. However, currently, all the problems have been settled. Even though he did not earn much, at least he managed to sell off all the houses at Thornton Park. "Mr. Lane, you really are my life savior." Mr. Jones grasped Jasper's hand and said, feeling moved. Even though John, who was standing aside, was just an observer, he was envious as well. He thought of his annual salary of more than $200,000. Even though the amount was way larger than any ordinary people's salary, when compared to Jasper's money, it seemed so trivial. Jasper was feeling quite pleased when he got to earn other people's income while being regarded as a savior. Although these houses had the potential to have their market value skyrocket in the future, the real estate company would not be able to withstand it until that time came. In history, their company went bankrupt after half a year. This time, Jasper was considered to have saved them. Hence, Jasper was just doing what he thought was right with no stress. At that moment, Dixon and Janice, who witnessed everything, were astonished to the point where they could not speak a word. Jasper brought Wendy to the entrance. He looked at the branded clothes Dixon and Janice were wearing before saying with a faint smile, "It seems that relying on branded items to show one's status is not worth anything." After speaking, Jasper immediately left the scene without looking at the pale looks on them both. "You don't have to see me off, Mr. Jackson. We'll be taking our leave now." Standing beside the BMW, Jasper smiled at John and said. John said with a sigh, "Mr. Lane, about last night's crude oil futures." "It was me." Jasper immediately admitted to it. Hearing Jasper admitting it personally made John's expression change drastically. Even though there was enough evidence, hearing it from Jasper himself still made John find it hard to believe. "Splendid," said John sincerely. "It's just luck," said Jasper. John shook his head and said, "Earning 10,000 or 20,000 is luck, but to earn that much, it's way beyond luck. You must not know about it. But this morning, the president of the district branch gave me a call and praised me. These blessings are all thanks to you. Brother, you have the abilities. It's just a matter of time before you get promoted," said Jasper with a smile. "I still have to depend on the help from great people. And that person is you," John said seriously. When saying that comment, John felt a pang of guiltiness. In the days before yesterday, they were both of equal ranking. However, Jasper had now become the country's #1 richest man. John, as the president of the district branch, really got to know someone influential this time. "Let's make this clear. We're both using each other for gains. There are many things I still have to thank you for helping me out," said Jasper with a smile and without the domineering vibe that John was worried about. As someone in such a sensitive position, John had seen plenty of people acting almighty once they managed to become rich overnight. Whoever they saw, they would act arrogantly, but Jasper was like his usual self and was never proud. John, who was praising Jasper from the bottom of his heart, chatted with Jasper for a while more. Then he personally saw him entering the car and left. Looking at the car, John shook his head and said in an envious tone, "It's damn good to have money. I'm absolutely envious."